Good evening. I'm calling this meeting to order. The time is 4:30 p.m. In accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code, Chapter 551, this meeting is officially open with a quorum present. Would you please stand as Mr. Clint Bond leads us in the pledges? Tonight's an exciting night for us. We have a positive trajectory with our student performance, and over time, not just in 1 year, but over time, longitudinal performance, and that's a great thing. And on that note, we have to keep the pedal to the metal, and we have to keep working for kids, and the only way we can do that is listen very closely to Ms. Shiro tonight as she gives a report on our proposed bond and TRE election. I hope that everyone will pay close attention. This is very serious, and it's going to affect kids for many years to come. Thank you, Ms. Shiro.
Excuse me. Yeah. Can I speak? Where are the documents for this? We have not seen them. We have no overarching information whatsoever on this bond. And so we're being shown that on a $950 billion bond when we haven't even seen the information.
Thank you. And where's Art?
Well, it was. That's a figure that's been floating around. That does not do it. There's no opportunity for reading and thinking and asking questions.
Thank you, President Jackson, members of the board.
Excuse me, I haven't finished yet.
Sorry.
I'm going home.
Okay.
I am not going to be part of this.
She's supposed to be here with AJ.
Okay, Ms. Shiro, would you like to begin your presentation?
Sure. I think we'll go ahead and get started.
We'll get started.
Thank you, President Jackson, members of the board. So tonight, we are delivering a presentation on a proposed bond and tax ratification election, TRE. But what we're really talking about is building an innovative learning environment, work that started about a year and a half ago. The reason we're doing this is because here in Fort Worth ISD, 60% of our school buildings were built before 1960. In 2007, Fort Worth ISD had approximately 80,000 students. Now in 2017, just over 10 years later, we have over 87,000 students. We've seen very rapid growth. We're projected to be over 90,000 students beginning in 2020. That's just 3 years away. And while we are on the upward trajectory academically, we also are, in terms of our student population, we'll be approaching 100,000 students here in Fort Worth very soon. This growth is exceptional, especially for a large urban school district, and thankfully, we have a board that's dedicated to supporting our mission of preparing all students for success in college, career, and community leadership. And our school district will continue to grow in both areas, in terms of student population as well as academic achievement. As we grow, we must have environments that support teaching and learning for the future of Fort Worth. This presentation has been 9 months in the making. And has touched thousands of stakeholders, teachers, principals, administrators, business leaders, faith-based and nonprofit leaders, as well as parents, and most importantly, students, student voice. Their vision, which is highly consistent, interestingly enough, among all the groups, highly consistent across the groups, is very aligned to the mission of this board, a mission that has been established for many years. We all know this, though, that our buildings cannot continue to look and operate the same way they did when they were first built. We must support next generation teaching and learning. So the innovative learning for our future, this is a process whereby we ask Fort Worth ISD students, staff, and community to share their highest hopes for success for our students. And here are the consistent expressed hopes that thousands of people landed on, both our internal and our external stakeholders. This is what they expressed for the future. One is that our students be prepared to choose either college or career, and that both are quality options. That students are prepared to contribute to the community, that students' school experience will be relevant and meaningful. Remember, when we first met about a year and a half ago, I talked a lot about the importance of rigor, relevance, and relationships in terms of our reform efforts, and this is an opportunity to do that. And that students will have a well-informed plan for what comes next after high school. Really, the most important semester of their high school career is the one after they graduate, to make sure that they're heading in a positive direction. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to our Chief Academic Officer, Charlie Carroll, to tell us how we got here.
Thank you, Dr. Scribner. Good evening, members of the board. I feel very fortunate to have joined the district when I did in July of 2016. There was a group of very interested individuals in the district that were already pushing us forward, looking at our facilities and what our needs would be for the next 10 to 20 years. And as we engaged in that process and brought on Engage to Learn and PBK as thought partners and as business partners, we went in on a very aggressive information gathering process with our constituents in our community. And as you can see on this slide, there was a concerted effort to reach out to the community. We met with 45 different focus groups, well over 20 educational summits. There are well over 5,000 people that we engaged with during the course of this, both internal and external people who gave us information and who interacted with us in a very positive way, in addition to an electronic survey. The point of all of that was to construct an educational design team, and that educational design team met on a number of occasions to come up with a rubric that we could use, and these red print pieces up here on the slide are components in that rubric that we used when we went out to our high schools to evaluate those campuses, not necessarily as buildings, but as learning spaces. Where are we going to be doing the types of learning, the type of activity, the type of technology integration in our existing buildings that we need to do to push our students forward to be competitive in the world that they'll be joining when they leave our high schools? These are the campuses that we visited, that we evaluated. This was a very interesting principal-led process where we went through and had quality conversations, very detailed conversations about not just these campuses, but their pyramids and the students that are coming to them and the needs that those students have as part of the individual campuses and pyramids in Fort Worth ISD. You'll see some familiar faces in many of these slides from Dunbar, from Arlington Heights, from Southwest, from Northside. These were very involved conversations, and one of the outgrowths of this, I'll share with the board just briefly, is that we also convened a high school principal summit at the PDC where they interacted and came up with some very innovative ideas to drive the district forward. And the product of all of that, with meeting with the high school principals, with the educational design team, all of it, is this set of recommendations moving forward over the next few years. And I'll just touch on a couple of them and summarize a bit, and then we'll move on to the next slide. But there are a couple of these that I know the board is interested in as well. Realigning and redirecting resources and reducing program redundancy are priorities for you all. They became priorities for us as we worked through this same process. And the building principals were actually, that group came up with the 4 regional CTE centers so that we could have centers for advanced learning to avoid redundancy at every campus and drive forward learning in our own district. The second and third from the bottom bullets, utilization of flexible spaces and enhancing our digital environment were also enormous priorities for this group as we push forward in making our learning environments relevant to our students. Dr. Scribner?
So as a result of the work that Mr. Carroll just described, we identified 5 critical areas to address. They are student growth and overcrowding. As we know, Fort Worth is one of the fastest growing cities in the nation, both with regard to our population but also our economic development. And that growth is also reflected in our classrooms. Specialized rigorous high schools and programs, where these schools have the potential to engage students in courses of study and career pathways that help both students and the district reach our shared goals of becoming college and career ready. In the future, we'll replace these schools as schools within schools, both as a way to offer all students a more comprehensive high school experience and to realize maximum efficiency with the taxpayer dollar. With this bond election, we would inaugurate the idea of making these schools both accessible and affordable by building them adjacent to established campuses. The career and technical education focus offers a recipe for success, we believe, for our students and for our city. Students will enter these centers for advanced study as part of a career pathway and leave with either a certification, a licensure, or an associate's degree in addition to their high school diploma. Regional CTE centers offer the district the opportunity to serve multiple campuses with one centralized facility, thus affecting staffing efficiencies and, again, using taxpayer dollars wisely. Additionally, CTE centers will provide us with the capacity to maximize the weighted funding from the state for our students in advanced coursework pathways. With regard to transforming our learning centers in Fort Worth ISD, we have a proud legacy of many buildings that exemplify their architectural character and history. With this bond, we're determined to make beautiful older buildings become effective learning centers for college and career readiness, embracing the historical significance of our buildings while modernizing the way we teach here in Fort Worth. Athletics and fine arts, we know based on data of student performance that fine arts and athletics have a significant positive effect on student growth. So let's take a look at each one of these, just some examples. So a new construction addressing our student growth and overcrowding pillar. We look at Tanglewood Relief Elementary School, additions at Arlington Heights, at Carter Riverside, Polytechnic High School, and South Hills. And you will be receiving a binder. They should be here now. I know that Mr. Cavazos is on his way, and apologize that those weren't here a few minutes ago. Renovations, Waverly Park Elementary School, Tanglewood again, Trimble Tech High School, and O.D. Wyatt also will see significant renovations. And the expected growth in the Benbrook area, land acquisitions will be necessary there, and with regard to the growth in the Clifford Davis Elementary School. Regarding specialized, rigorous high schools and programs, again, just some examples. The new World Language Institute, that campus to be co-located at Western Hills High School. A new Young Men's Leadership Academy campus contiguous to Dunbar High School, and the new Texas Academy for Biomedical Sciences campus at Tarrant County College, Trinity River campus. In each one of these cases, we're talking about a small specialized high school embedded into or nearby a large comprehensive high school, whereby those students can enjoy the academic rigor of the small and specialized school, but also get exposure to athletics and after-school and extracurricular programs. It also provides some economies of scale. Smaller schools are much more expensive to operate. These schools are extremely successful. And because they're successful, when we talked about the programs of choice and shrinking the number, but doubling down on the good ones, and these are highly successful schools that we believe can be replicated. With regard to our regional CTE centers, just some examples: construction of the first of 4 regional CTE centers across the city to create career paths in the STEM areas for the transportation industry, which is big here in North Texas, hospitality, tourism, culinary arts, architecture and construction, public service, public leadership in police and fire high schools, health and science, cosmetology, agriculture, and horticulture as some examples. Regarding the transforming our learning environment, this would include the flexible use of general education classrooms, the creation of collaboration and maker spaces. The workplace of today is different than it was years ago. We want to prepare our students for success in college and career. Also, fine arts spaces and life cycle maintenance at all of our campuses. Looking at the transforming our learning environment, and again, please, some specific examples. So in addition to collaboration and maker spaces at virtually every campus, some examples at Diamond Hill Jarvis High School, we would be recommending science classrooms and CTE classrooms, OD Wyatt, fine arts classrooms, in addition to significant life cycle maintenance, Trimble Tech, a CTE, an organizational strategy whereby those CTE programs that have high participation would grow. Those who have smaller participation, we may want to take a very hard look at how many of those would continue into the future, in addition to science classrooms. Arlington Heights, again, CTE is not just at the centers, but also there are successful programs in the comprehensive high schools. Science classroom wing, also renovation. South Hills sees very high enrollment, so a significant classroom addition would be recommended there, as well as significant renovations. At Polytech High School, 10 science classrooms and a fine arts building. Eastern Hills is another example where we'd be recommending the renovation of the original science labs so that we could change those into instructional classrooms. Dunbar, renovate and expand the library. Western Hills, in addition to the small specialized high school that would be coming, provide commons and collaboration area. Southwest High School, the STEM and robotics lab is an example. At Carter Riverside, new fine arts building for band and orchestra and choir. That would serve two purposes. It also creates some classroom space for a very crowded school. Northside High School Mariachi Edition, the award-winning group, classroom storage and rehearsal in this first phase. And Benbrook Middle High finished what we started there with regard to the athletic fields and field house and a gymnasium at Pascal High School. So those are just some examples. Again, your detail should be here momentarily. And at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Elsie Shiro, who can talk about the financial plan that we would be recommending, not tonight, but coming up in a week or so. Elsie.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Scribner and members of the board. So what is the district's financial strategy to fund the capital improvements to our campuses in the November 17 bond election in TRE? Well, I propose, and the district also proposes, that we use both of our tax rates to finance and/or pay for our campus's needs over the coming years without raising our total tax rate. And this slide, for the public's purposes and for the board, I wanted to briefly go over our current tax rates with you. Of course, they're made up of two parts. The first is the maintenance and operations tax rate, commonly known as M&O, and it's used annually to operate the district's operations, and we adopt a budget on it on an annual basis. And then we have the interest and sinking tax rate. It's referred as the debt service tax rate, and that is used to pay the annual principal and interest on previously authorized debt. Currently, the M&O tax rate is $1.04 per $100 valuation, and that is the highest rate that we can adopt without taxpayer approval. And the debt service tax rate is 31.2 cents, and basically that is increased and is driven by voter-approved bonds. So as we sit, and we have for a couple of years, our total tax rate is $1.35.2 cents per $100 valuation. So this slide is presented so you can see historically how the district has financed its capital assets. It generally issues bonds that match the useful life of the asset to the term of the debt. So if we're building new buildings, and major renovations, we're going to finance them for 25 years. But if in fact we're buying other assets that are not new construction and major renovation, we have historically, through the issuance of bonds, financed buses and other vehicles and musical instruments and uniforms and technology and furniture based upon their useful life as kind of expressed on this slide. What I wanted to kind of show, and I'll spend a little time on this slide because I believe it's important, because when you finance shorter-term assets, less than 25 years, that serves to drive up the debt service tax rate in the near term. So if you look at this slide, you'll see a red line and you'll see a blue line. And they both start, and on the left axis there is the INS tax rate in cents. So although it's hard to see, both of those lines begin at about 31.2 cents, and that's our current tax rate. But you'll see that if in fact we continue to finance shorter-term assets, that then in the shorter term, you're going to see how that red line spikes and escalates, and then over time, it declines and finally kind of meets up back with that line, the blue line that you're seeing there. And it takes several years for it to kind of level out. And in this scenario, the thing is if we're financing shorter-term assets, then that could drive up the tax rate nearly 4 cents. And so what we're trying to portray here is that if in fact going forward, we start financing only 25-year debt, you're going to see that blue line pretty much is pretty steady, and it actually declines over time. And as a result, we're able to reduce the debt service tax rate because we're financing only 25-year debt. And that gives us the opportunities that I'm going to be explaining about a TRE in just a few minutes. So by moving 2 cents to the M&O tax rate and reducing the debt service tax rate by the same amount still maintains our total tax rate at $1.35.2. So here, what that does, it serves a couple of purposes, and one that is significant in that it allows us to get additional funding from the state and from local tax collections on the maintenance and operations side of the house for us now to start thinking about paying for shorter-term assets versus financing them. So what are the assumptions? We've got to make some assumptions in order for everyone to understand how all of this can come to work together and very good financially for the district. Well, first, as I reiterated, going forward, we'd only finance major capital projects and renovations with 25-year terms. Secondly, we're putting some assumptions that the interest rates 5 to 6 years will range and will not go above 5%. Third, our taxable property values increase at percentages shown there through 2023. We're starting at 8% increase in values for 18-19, and then declining by percentage to 2% by 2023. Fourth, the assumption is that there are no major legislative enactments placing ceilings on annual property tax growth or an increase in exemptions. So with the above assumptions, the district can reduce the debt service tax rate by 2 cents and have the ability to discharge annual principal and interest payments not only on previously issued debt, but on debt to be issued as a result of a 2017 bond election. So based upon the assumptions outlined on the previous slide, the district has the debt capacity to sell on average $100 million a year in bonds for up to 10 years within the debt service tax rate of 29.2 cents. So what needs to be done to exchange these 2 cents between the debt service side and the M&O? Well, first, the board needs to adopt an M&O tax rate of $1.06 for 2017. When that happens, that automatically puts into place a tax ratification election that would occur in November the 7th, commonly known as a TRE. We have to do that because we cannot raise the M&O tax rate above $1.04 unless the voters approve it. So we would go ahead and adopt $1.06. And we'd plan to do that in next week. If it passes, then our M&O tax rate will be $1.06 going forward. And our debt service rate will be 29 cents going forward. And our overall tax rate will be $1.35.2, just like it has been. And so it's a win-win there. If the voters say no, and they can say no to that, then basically it's called rollback, would roll back to $1.04 on the M&O side. And then unfortunately, we would lose that opportunity in additional state aid, as I just went over. I think this slide really does show the importance of the voters approving the TRE. On the left, you'll see the tax rate. It starts at $1.04 and it goes to $1.17. And then further to the left, you're going to see these pennies, and a couple are golden and some are called copper. And so that's the kind of terminology that the state uses. The thing is when you see there is the philosophy behind that, and the state's opinion is that if the taxpayers of Tarrant County and of this district choose to increase the tax on the M&O side, the tax rate, that it's like a partnership. And the state then also says yes and contributes. In this instance, the golden pennies are very important, because the golden pennies bring, per penny, over $3 million in local tax collections and just under $9 million in state aid. So when you combine those 2 cents together, that what brings about the additional revenue of $23 million. And I'm telling the board, and, we would be informing the public that we're not asking, for any of the copper pennies, and we're interested in basically exchanging 2 cents in order to maintain the same total tax rate that we have. So what do we do with the additional revenue from the TRE? As I say, now we're going to pay for and not finance the buses or White Fleet or musical instruments. And some of the renovations that are needed are at our elementary, middle, and high schools, that basically the renovations are such that really don't qualify to finance for 25 years. So now we have monies available in our coffers to pay for some of the needed repairs. And we could pay, actually, we'll budget for them and pay cash for them on an annual basis. This slide is an example of how our 2017 bond could be structured. There has been any number of discussions as to what should be the dollar amount of the 2017 bond. Should it be smaller or larger in amount? And here is just an example of somewhere in the middle. Since we have the capacity on average to sell $100 million in bonds annually for up to 10 years without an increase in the debt service tax rate, the term and size of this bond is still up for discussion and final determination. This example is a budget. Assuming that the taxpayers say yes to a TRE, then every year, in addition to us adopting, our regular budget, we would work together to determine how we would use the $23 million in additional revenue. And this is just an example, but we could use some, of course, for campus technology and for campus repair and renovations. Mr. Cavazos has a bus rotation schedule. We have athletic and fine arts equipment and uniforms. We have all the things that we used to buy, but now, we used to finance, that now that we can actually purchase. And so we would jointly work together to do this. And so we would adopt a budget, that would also take care of this additional revenue. And then if there was anything extra, then the board could decide exactly how it would utilize the funds. So for this to happen, what do we need to do? Well, on August the 15th, we're going to have a special called board meeting, and the board must adopt an M&O tax rate of $1.06 and a debt service tax rate of 29.2 cents. And so the overall tax rate will remain $1.35.2. After that, on the same night, the board must adopt a resolution in order calling for a tax ratification election on November the 7th. On that evening, the board can adopt a resolution in order calling for a bond election. But that must be done. If it's not done on the 15th, then it has to be done on or before August 21st, 2017, in order to have a November 7th bond election. So with that, I'll turn final comments back over to Dr. Scribner.
So we started this, this presentation with instruction, and we're ending it with instruction. This is the new Fort Worth ISD learning model, a model where students are challenged to learn in new and innovative ways, a model where students are expected to research and create products representative of their learning. Students then communicate their learning in a variety of methods to receive feedback that will allow them to reflect and grow. It's a next generation learning model. We must support this next generation by by providing teachers and students school buildings and learning environments that in fact are next generation learning environments. So we will not be voting on anything tonight. Over the next few days, actually, Art is here. He has binders for each of you with more detail, much more detail. Over the next few days, we look forward to your input and prior to us coming back to the board for a final vote moving forward. So, Art, can you please describe what is in these binders?
Certainly. I'll just wait a second here so that the binders can be distributed. I think Dr. Scribner mentioned that, over 60% of our schools are from 1960, and about over 80% of our schools are from 1980. And 1980 seems like not too long ago, but that's 37 years ago. And most of the facilities are built for 30 to 50 years. So we are facing a deep, deep need for us to face reality and to try to address our facilities. And I believe Ms. Shiro mentioned the fact that we are in a good financial position, thanks to growth in our downtown, 7th Street, et cetera. We have good, healthy property values that will allow us to address this. Now the question becomes is, how much are we willing to invest in our facilities? And I believe Mr. Carroll mentioned that we not only want to fix our facilities, we not only want to, repair water lines and so forth, we want to make them ready for another 30 to 50 years of education, the fine facilities that we have. So this has been a real long road. This started almost 2 years ago with the board naming a facility master plan committee. It took us a while to evaluate and figure out how we were going to get here. The board passed guiding principles in January, and we started running from there. We've brought in a consultant, and I believe Mr. Carroll mentioned that we've spent the last year trying to figure out what do our programs need to look like. Because even though we are in a good financial position, we cannot waste any dollars. The other thing that I want to point out is that inflation is biting at us. So what we've done is, like Elsie said, we've kind of landed in the middle of the road, a 5-6 year proposal, and that's kind of what you have in front of you. So I'll go over what you have in front of you. I know that for all practical purposes, you've just seen it today, so I'm going to go over it so that you can go back, review it.
Right. We'll give them a few days to do that and come back. Miss.
We have a few questions from the board.
Okay, certainly.
First questions are from trustee Christine Moss.
Thank you, President Jackson. The TRE funds, I hope that we do get it passed, so, because I think that's a really good way to pay for what we need rather than the financing, because we can save with that. Also, Art, you were saying that we are in a good position now financially, and that we're all growing, and downtown is growing and all that. What did you mean by that?
Our property
The
values.
tax.
Yes, our tax base, which is what finances our debt.
Right, so we get more taxes from downtown than anywhere else.
That would be something that Elsie could provide to you, but we get taxes from all sources, including downtown, yes.
Oh, yes, all sources, yeah. I just wondered if you were saying that we get more taxes from downtown than the neighborhoods or whatever. Because thank you. One of the things I thought about was how did we get to a 10-year bond? I am not in support of 10 years. That's just too long. You will forget you have a bond, 10 years. And who wants to wait for the school that they serve to get the needs met, wait 10 years? And we've not done that in FWISD. And I'm not saying that it's not time to change, but I just want you to know that where I stand. I think this 6,088,000 or somewhere in the ballpark, it's a good figure, but I am not ready for 10 years. And I'm just letting you know ahead where I stand, so it won't be a question. And I'm ready for all of the things that we need to do in this district to help our students grow. So thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Moss. Trustee Dr. Ann Sutherland.
Well, I did come back to listen, but I'm not much happier. I want to say, first of all, that CFO Shiro, you have done a wonderful job with this money, and I know that you've worked really hard at it. I'm sorry that I can't say the same for the program side of our school district. We have been told that our central office is going to decline in cost, but in fact, it's increased dramatically, 32% over the last 2 years. At the same time, we are not getting answers on our open records request. I sent one asking for a chart that compared the last 2 years with this year. I got a chart that compared the first year and the third year without the second year, and there were things in it that were not included in the mother chart, which I asked to have copied. Finally, I was astounded to find out that of the $4.5 million the board approved for the 3 schools that needed improvement, $3.5 million of that is going to the central office, and only $1 million of it is going to school. So I know that it sounds like I'm pretty irritated, but I have done everything I can to get this district to start facing what needs to be done. I'll tell you one more thing. We have these
Please,
schools.
Dr.
I'm
Sutherland,
almost-
please stay with questions for the bond and stay on the agenda,
I'm on the
please.
bond, okay? We
Okay,
talk
thank
about
you.
more schools of choice. A month ago, I sent copies of an analysis I did of the schools of choice showing which ones are under-enrolled and which ones are over-enrolled. There's no evidence. I sent it actually to the whole board, and I sent it to several people in the administration. No one is even looking at it. So we are proposing to add more schools of choice when we haven't even figured out whether the ones we have are earning their keep. And I only mention this at this stage because I do not believe that we have the capacity to spend the money that Elsie is finding with us in an intelligent manner. And that's about all I have to say. I am very unlikely to change my mind.
Thank you, Dr. Sutherland. Trustee Norman Robbins.
Thank you, President Jackson. I would like to commend the staff and the consultants that have worked with us for the last several years on presenting us with what I perceive to be the most well-thought-out bond program that we've had over the last 2 or 3 that I've been engaged with. So I thank you for that. I was tremendously impressed with the stakeholder input that was received, and when I participated in a session in February, I was very pleased and impressed with the community input that was provided. So I assume that happened all over town, which again I think adds to the credibility of this bond program. I know that we are going to go through the programs of choice, and those that have very small and limited numbers will probably be eliminated or merged somehow into something else because we're all concerned about the cost involved in doing that. So that is part of all this process, and it will go on in conjunction with the bond election. I'm also very impressed with moving The 2 cents, why we haven't done that before now, I don't know, but it makes a lot of sense. It was crazy for us to finance with long-term bonds, things that have very short lifespans. So there's a lot of benefit to doing that. Obviously haven't had a chance to go through the detail. I'm in a very high-growth area, and I want to make sure that we're able to take care of the growth that's going to occur in that part of the community. So I'll be looking at that with great interest. But from what I've seen in a cursory manner and the presentation that I received from the staff last week, I'm very impressed with what you've done, and I thank you very much. Look forward to working with you.
Trustee Ashley Paz.
Thank you, President Jackson. Mrs. Shiro, I think you've done a great job on your funding strategy. I am in full support of the tax swap. I echo what all of my colleagues here have said, and I think it's just good practices. As far as the bond program, I have a lot of concerns, and I addressed those concerns yesterday. Yesterday, I was presented finally with the overall, well, not the overall, for District 9, the needs assessment and what would be done. It included a presentation that talked about the needs of Carter Riverside High School. And I would really like to not talk just about District 9, but that's all that I was presented with until now, which I'm appreciative of the binder. But if we're going to get away from your district versus my district and individual trustees only focusing on individual trustee districts, we can't keep doing it this way. But since that's the way that it was presented to me, I'm going to talk about Carter Riverside, which is the comprehensive high school in District 9. 4 years ago, when I came onto the board, was right before we called the last bond. At that time, Carter Riverside was slated to get a handful of classrooms, which they did get, and a new cafeteria and a couple of things that they needed. It did not come close to addressing the needs of Carter Riverside. Superintendent Scribner, when you came to Fort Worth ISD, the very first thing that I did was took you to Carter Riverside and walk you through the halls of that school so that you could see for yourself the needs of Carter Riverside. We just lost 2 great art teachers at Carter Riverside because of the conditions they had to work under. And at that time, 4 years ago, I was told, well, we can't afford to do it now. We'll do it the next bond. Apparently, the bond before that, my predecessor was told the same thing, and the community at Carter Riverside was told the same thing. Now, here we are 4 years ago, or 4 years later, coming up to the next bond. It's great to put in a fine arts center for Carter Riverside. It doesn't come close to addressing the needs of Carter Riverside. This is one of the worst off campuses in Fort Worth ISD when it comes to the facilities and the overcrowding. And a boundary change alone and a fine arts center alone are not going to address those needs. And I feel like, well, as evidenced over the last decade or so, that Carter Riverside has gotten peanuts for addressing their facilities. They've had to fight for every single thing that they've gotten. When it comes to their programs of choice and any programmatic issues that they have to fight for everything. They don't have a very active community. They don't have a lot of organization like we have in some other areas, but they have the same needs. And I'm really disappointed that those needs are not being addressed in this bond, and that they were actually taken out of this bond. You recognize that they have those needs, but they actually need a new school, is what I was told, but we can't afford to do that now, so they're getting a fine arts center, and that's unacceptable. And I don't want to hold the needs of the rest of the district hostage for Carter Riverside, but without having seen what else we're being offered or is being called for the rest of Fort Worth ISD, I can only assume that there are other needs that are just as important as what we have at Carter Riverside in the rest of Fort Worth ISD. And without some major work, I can't support this.
Thank you, Trustee Paz. Trustee Needham?
Thank you, President Jackson. Ms. Shiro, I want to commend you and your staff, your bond advisors from First Southwest for the creative is not the right word, but the sensible financing for this bond issue, and with going for 25-year bonds and using those 2 pennies that we've just left on the table that the state had for us. In doing what you are recommending for the taxpayers, they're getting a wonderful value. Hopefully, we will pass a bond somewhere in the neighborhood of 600 to 700 million, and it won't cost the taxpayers a single penny. Now, that benefits our students in all our schools for years to come. And I don't know of another school district that can put that much out, or that has, for not raise the property taxes a penny or 10 pennies or whatever. So thank you for what you've presented to us. I'm frustrated, as are a number of board members, Ms. Paz, Dr. Sutherland. This is a lot of show and tell. I have a real problem that this has been kept a secret from all of us for almost a year now. We do not have our list of what makes up the 688 million. And I hope another day doesn't go past. I assured Dr. Sutherland that we would have it by tomorrow. Art, if it's in here, I didn't see it. Now, I know PBK and some others aren't sure of the numbers. Well, it's too late. It's past late. We should have known. Since I've been on the board, we've had 3 or 4 bond issues, and we have had the numbers going out for 5 years. And somebody in this room, or some bodies, know what those numbers are. And you're forcing us to go down to the last minute, and I swore that wouldn't happen like it did the last bond. And sure enough, here's a big book with lots of show and tell, and we don't know what anything is except our own school. As she said yesterday, I got it on Tuesday. We don't know what any other schools are, what the 200 million is in the deferred maintenance. Maybe that got shifted to did that get shifted to the TRE?
Yes, the thing is it depending on the type of projects that will be completed, if in fact they don't qualify for 25-year bonds, then they're going to shift to the TRE for payment in cash.
I urge Mr. Cavazos and PBK to get us some kind, just put draft. If you can't do it, I'll take it to somebody here in town that's a contractor, and I'll get the numbers. We will get the numbers. We cannot go 2 more weeks down to the 20th and say, okay, just trust us. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Needham. Trustee Dr. T.A. Sims.
I am really looking at this bond. The last bond we had, our needs were supposed to have been $750 million at a minimum. Somewhere between this figure coming to our constituents, it was reduced by $250 million. We have greater needs this time than we had the last time. I don't know how we pay for it, but for us to continue to compete with these districts that we are in close proximity of, we'll have to find some money and give our schools and our students what they need. If other districts do what they're doing, and we're supposed to be in fairly good financial position, this bond is too small. And I want to see us go back to the drawing board and come with some figures that's going to help us get these schools in a position to where our kids have the best opportunities for learning, and we also have facilities that they are happy to go in and work hard to learn in. We need more than $600 to $700 million. I don't know where you find it, but I want to see somebody go in and come back with some more figures that's going to closer bring us into a position to where we can get the needs for our students and the school district what we need. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sims. I just make a few comments. I want to first thank the staff, and I know you all have worked very, very hard. I too am slightly disappointed that we ended up with the book late today. I'm impressed, though, Ms. Shiro, you're grabbing the 2 pennies. Those 2 golden pennies represent 37% of the total dollars that are available there with just 2 cents. It's amazing, and like Trustee Needham said and Ms. Paz said, I'm glad that you found them, and I'm glad that you've come up with this plan of action. I will ask from the programmatic side for consideration of Superintendent Scribner and Mr. Cavazos and others, a longitudinal analysis. What I've heard tonight from all the trustees is this: we don't know if we are truly serving our students with equity and excellence. We have no idea, because we don't know which districts or which pyramids have been served. We don't know the condition of the buildings. We know the age of them because we hear you all talk about it, but we know the need is high. And as Dr. Sims said, we want children in schools where they're proud to be there and when they maximize opportunities, because that's how Fort Worth becomes a better city. So whether we look at it by pyramid, by district, or geographically, north, south, east, west, doesn't make a difference to me. And I agree with Ms. Paz. If we're going to move to a district level and look at things at a district level, which is exciting, then let's do it and stop looking at it as single-member districts. So thank you. And Dr. Scribner, any comments from you?
That's it. Thank you.
Okay, at this time, we will move to public comment. Let me remind you that because of restrictions by the Open Meetings Act in Texas, board members may not engage in a verbal exchange about a subject that has not been posted. We will listen and we will take notes, but the board is prohibited from responding to any inquiries made during a board meeting on any topic not posted on the agenda. However, the board may reply with, 1, a statement of specific factual information given in response to the inquiry, 2, recitation of existing policy in response to the inquiry, or 3, direct the person to visit with staff about the issue. While the board listens to concerns of a general nature and issues of common and individual concern, the board will not hear complaints about specific individual employees or public officers during the public comment session. Speakers shall refrain from mentioning names of individual employees or public officers during their comments. Any employee, parent, or other member of the public is asked to comply with the appropriate grievance policy to have a complaint heard pursuant to the applicable board policy. In accordance with Board Policy BED Local, speakers shall have a 3-minute time limit, and I ask that you please observe this rule. Furthermore, a speaker may not relinquish his or her time to another speaker. Delegations of 5 or more persons shall appoint 1 person to present their views before the board, with the time not to exceed 5 minutes. At this time, I'd like to call Juan Carlos Portello forward to speak. And either podium is fine.
Buenas tardes. Gracias al board por escucharnos. Yo vengo a hablar sobre el instituto de World Language Institute, ¿verdad? He estado viendo que cada meeting hemos estado viniendo, hemos preguntado al board cómo está la situación para el nuevo building y hemos tratado de tener algunas respuestas.
Good afternoon. Thank you, the FWISD district, for letting me be here. I'm here because we have been asking about the new building for the World Language Center.
Ok. Mi comentario es, cuando mi hija terminó el sexto grado, ella tuvo que hacer una hoja de qué era lo que quería hacer en su vida.
When my daughter finished sixth grade, she was asked to make a paper about what she wants to do in her life.
Ok, nosotros en la familia corremos un negocio. En ese negocio lo podemos hacer en varios países. Entonces ella dijo, papá, tú solo manejas inglés y español. Dice, cuando yo acabe la escuela, él ya piensa agarrar 2 lenguas más y ella dice que vamos a movernos a esos países también.
In my family, we have a business that we can do in different countries. Since I, as a dad, can speak 2 languages, my daughter decided to take 2 more languages so we can grow in different countries if she learned 2 different languages.
Entonces ahora le doy gracias a los maestros del World Institute y gracias a ustedes por haber hecho este programa de tener más lenguajes para los niños.
I am thankful to the teachers and this program because the kids have the ability to learn other languages.
Ok, ahora los niños en el área donde están, en esa escuela, no tienen el suficiente espacio para poder trabajar. Ahora el programa es de 6 hasta el 12 y ellos nomás ahora tienen, parece que la mitad. Entonces ellos sí necesitan tener lo que sigue. Y como ella está en el sexto grado, vamos a seguir luchando. Yo creo que ustedes prometieron que se iba a hacer y se va a hacer. Y no vamos a parar hasta que siga habiendo no solo un instituto de eso, sino que haya más para cada área.
Now the problem is that the facilities are not enough. Now we are supposed to have 6th to 12th grade, but we just have half of the way, and we don't have the facilities to see the program growing. We are hoping to have a bigger building, and you promise we will have it, and we are going to continue asking for it.
Y ahora nosotros como padres a nuestros hijos les exigimos buenas calificaciones, ¿verdad? Entonces, ahora yo creo que si a los niños les preguntamos qué calificación le darían ellos a los miembros del board.
We as the parents ask our kids to have good grades. Now if we ask our parents what grade they will give to the board, that will be different.
Y yo si les pregunto, se me hace que van a decir que les dan un grado A, ¿verdad?
I'm sure that they will give you an A.
Pero nosotros siempre les decimos, si puedes agarrar un B o una A, está bien, pero siempre dar el máximo para que puedas agarrar más que eso.
But we always tell our kids to try to get an A or B, but always do your best.
Okay. Entonces, para nosotros sería que si ustedes quieren recibir el A+, entonces tendría que haber un poquito extra.
So if you want to get an A+, I think you should be a little better.
Thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you. Adrian Mendoza.
Good afternoon, President Jackson, members of the board, and Superintendent Dr. Scribner. My name is Adrian Mendoza, and I'm going to be 8th grader next year at the World Languages Institute. But I remember 3 years ago, I was still in elementary school, 5th grade, and I remember having a time where we had to get all together, all the 5th grade classes, together to have the students think of the middle school they're wanting to go to start thinking about their future. And we were shown a video about the different schools in the district, shown their characteristics and what's special about them, what special programs are in them. And the World Languages Institute stuck out to me. I really like to learn new things, and I thought that languages were something very cool to learn. So I wanted to learn maybe 1 or 2 new languages. And so I decided to go for that school. I applied, and during the summer before 6th grade, I was accepted. 6th grade was a very fun year. And apart from learning all the new languages, I got to go into an more advanced math class. I was taking 8th grade math during 6th grade. And then 7th grade was just as good as 6th grade was. I was taking Algebra 1 and I was taking 8th grade science. And apart, I also had chosen French as my language, so was also learning that as well. This school was looking like the best choice I could have made. But until recently, we have been, we started up with beginning to notice that we were getting a little crowded, that we wanted a new building. But the options that we were given was to split our school. Our school was supposed to be a 6th through 12th school. We wanted to split the 6th and 8th graders, 6th, 7th, and 8th to stay in one building, the high schoolers to move to, I believe, Northwest. And we don't only want more space, we want to stay together as a school. We've wanted the specialty of the school to stay together as students 6 through 12 in the same building. We've had students leave, and because they don't want to have to share a building with a different school. During this summer, I participated in A2I geometry at Eastern Hills, and that was very exciting for me. But before, when we took our entry exams for that, our vice principal had also wanted to talk to us 7th graders to tell us what taking A2I meant.
Thank you. Carlos Fresenius. Juan Fresenius. Yeah. I guess they made a mistake. I thought it would be Juan and Carlos Tercios. Yes, no, I'm well aware, sir, but somebody wrote F-R-E-S-E-N-I-U-S. But you know what? If we take the F-R-E-S off, it would be genius, and that would be good.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, there you go.
Yes,
Go
yes.
ahead and welcome, Carlos.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your time. Good evening, Board, President, and Superintendent. I am here to address the Board of the uncertain future that the World Languages Institute face. The district says they are going to move our school to the Western Hills area. How can we be sure that everything that we have been promised will be accomplished? From the dual credits we were promised to the international trips, and the big one was having our permanent building. There are other options instead of Western Hills, and I am speaking not only from my voice, but from the parents, from the students, and from everyone from my community. I'm here representing all of these parents and all of these students. We, the parents and students, don't want the separation of our school, not even for a year. And actually, we want the Southwest area to be our new school. We have sent you a petition of nearly 400 signatures. With these many signatures, it shows a clear message that we want that plan instead. We need answers of when these promises are going to be accomplished. Time is running out for our students. Their education is at stake. If you're for success for the students, then show it. Show it here, at this school, because if nothing is done, we don't get our dual credits, we don't get our classes, we don't get our permanent building, then this fails. And you will have failed at your community, at your children, at your family, and at yourself. This is a test to the district, a test to see if you are willing to help and if your message is true, to help all 90,000 students in this district. I believe in education. I believe in the future of these students and the future of this community and the future of this city. So let us start in this school. Let us make the future of our generation the reality. Let us give them a bright future for them, because they are the ones who will make this country, who will make this city. So let us give all these 300 students a chance to be successful in life, to be successful in their career, to make their life. Everyone in this boardroom went to school at some point in their life. And education is the greatest thing that mankind has. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Carlos. Mr. Juan Tercios? Mr. Tercios is not present? Carlos? Okay, thank you. Thank you for the World Languages Institute for coming down tonight, and also thank you for sharing your thoughts. At this time, we will reconvene in the board conference room for regular session. We'll take a slight recess. Meeting is now recessed and will be called to order in the board conference room. In accordance with the open meetings law, the board opened the meeting at 4:33 PM in the boardroom with a quorum present. Recessed open session in the boardroom is now reconvened at 5:45 PM in open session in the boardroom conference room with a quorum present. At this time, are there any questions concerning agenda items? None whatsoever? We may have a moment to wait for our guest, A.J. Craybill, then. Would you like to? Okay. This concludes the discussion of agenda items. We will now move on to the next item in the session.
So we're going to.
And we're going to go ahead and recess and
good to see you.
Monday, August 21st is the first day of school for Fort Worth ISD.
Welcome. This is our first day of school.
Excelente, excelente. This is my first year teaching, and I love it. Son fabricados por seres humanos. I just loved Fort Worth ISD. I graduated from Fort Worth ISD, and then I wanted to stay in that district. También puedes levantar el... Fort Worth ISD has so many resources for new teachers. They have the New Teacher Academy, they have professional development classes, and they have so many mentors out there that they assign to you that help you every day. Todos los siguientes son recursos naturales. Fort Worth ISD is one of the best districts to work for as a new teacher. Hago como una pregunta, and I tell them every day, you're going to be a college, graduate one day, and you have to prepare now.
¿Cuándo saben cuál es el secreto?
And I'm making an impact in their lives, just like my teacher made an impact in my life. Okay, high five, good, yay, good job. That's the most rewarding, and that's why I love to teach, to make a difference in my community.
Excelente, ¿están listos para jugar?
And that's why I'm teaching in my community where I grew up.
On the rolling grasslands of the Great Plains, chain link fences and secured buildings bear silent witness to a secret. What lay hidden beneath the plains of 7 states was a force that could lay waste to the world we know.
The Air Force, when they finally went ahead and brought the Minuteman concept out and said, this is what we want to do, they wanted to have 10,000 missiles.
And the first time I was asked, a lady said, if this bothers you, but what did you think about turning the key and firing these things? And I was shocked. I really, just incredible, because the actual answer was, the truth, I'd never thought about it. And I thought, well, wait a minute, it's kind of stupid, you're going to destroy the world, you certainly should think about it.
Yes, sir.
Are the treaties only between the United States and the Russian Federation?
I will say this, a lot of the nuclear powers have agreed on their own to go ahead and stop the proliferation of nuclear weapons by not allowing the outflow of the technology necessary to make those things a reality.
When they put Sputnik up, it was almost worse than Pearl Harbor in this country. I was an adult. I had graduated high school by then. They could drop a nuclear warhead on New York City and we couldn't stop it.
Now tell me right out loud, what are you supposed to do when you see the flash?
It's a difference learning it from the classroom and actually seeing all this with your eye. So I'm very excited about this.
Delta One, what we've got is the above ground facility and the below ground launch control center. So you've got the fence around it, you've got open farmland around it, the cows are right here up to it. So we're right in the middle of American agrarian heartland here, and here's this Air Force installation right here in the middle of it. And that's what this came down to. The American public accepted this into their homelands to go ahead and provide this defense against the Soviet Union. We are about to go down into the Delta One Launch Control Center vestibule. We're going 31 feet underground. Now, this is the vestibule. This is an 8-ton blast door, and it can be moved with 16 pounds of pressure.
Watch your step.
This is the cab. From this point, this is where the deputy commander's key goes in. And on the upper right corner of the commander's desk right over there is where his key went in. Both keys had to be turned within 3 seconds of each other and held. And they're 12 feet apart, which is another one of the security measures why we've got 2 officers. We're going to go to Delta 9, which is the missile silo that we still maintain. It's the last of the 150 missiles that were in South Dakota. What we have here is a glass enclosure over the top of a Minuteman II silo.
I've never seen a missile, so it's pretty interesting.
So we actually have a bird so people can actually take a look into the face of Armageddon, because Other than the fact that she's got no fuel on board and no warhead, that's the real thing.
It was a good experience, you know. It's really big. See straight through. I got a couple photos.
It's pretty interesting to think that there was just these large missiles under the ground that could just be launched with the press of a button. I was just so surprised at how many that are around here.
Just all this land out here that I haven't explored, it makes me feel like the United States is a bigger place, a beautiful place.
in the Badlands!
My name is Gerardo Villarreal. I'm from Mexico.
¿Y qué pasa si yo le...
Prior to becoming a teacher, I had a different career. I have my own company of advertising and sales. Switching careers is not easy, and at the beginning I was kind of nervous.
Mi tortuguita!
I went to the New Teachers Academy. They've been so friendly to me. They give weekly trainings. They give me a really, really good opportunity for coming here and teaching Spanish and English. The idea of this program is that whenever they get to 5th grade,
De las primeras escuelas.
they are 100% bilingual and ready for academic purposes in both languages. ¿Qué más?
Los niños mayores.
Every hour counts.
Recto, siguiente.
Every day
escucho.
counts.
Sí.
Muy bien.
Just helping the kids. It's incredible how in every month you can see them changing and growing. That's pretty amazing, being a life changer with the kids.
What do you expect to get out of this trip?
Sir, to learn more about the Cold War and really see it eye to eye.
Let's load them up. We loaded our Fort Worth ISD bus with approximately 25 cadets and departed to Love Field
Secure your bag.
to await our flight on to Denver and commercial transportation to Rapid City, South Dakota.
This is going to be an awesome trip.
We will go to Mount Rushmore, on to the Badlands, and the Missile Man National Historic Park.
The main goal of this project, Arctic Equality, is to study issues of inclusion related to national parks.
It's important that you understand our history. I'd like to get someone who knows the information in the area.
I'm excited for you that you get to do this. This is a big deal.
I was fortunate enough to help write the high school military history curriculum. Some of the lessons you might be learning in class, I could have been the author to. And I thank you for your intellect that you're going to share with us as this couple days unfold.
My name is Kirby Hicks. I'm a teacher here at Trimble Tech High School, but my class is a little different. This is my classroom. Welcome to Trimble Tech Welding. My class is a welding and metal fabrication class and also metal art. Envision it, put it together, and see what happens. I started off in the industry as a community college teacher, and then I went back into the industry and built armored cars for, some of the top security companies around the world. But it was filling but not fulfilling. So then I came back to teaching. See how it's keeping the blade on the same thing? Working with the next generation of welders is fulfilling more than I ever thought. I feel like I'm giving back. Does everybody know how to adjust it? A teacher that is looking to do what I'm doing has to have the passion to want to love this job. Not like it, love it. Those days when the kids come back, maybe a year later, 6 months later, and they've grown so much, they're helping their families. It hits you right here in the heart. and makes it all worthwhile.
What is a student expectation? I am originally from Arkansas and I moved to Fort Worth about a year ago. We love Fort Worth. I think the best thing about working for Fort Worth Independent School District is the relationships that I'm able to build. Good morning, Ms. Guinness. I'm able to work with colleagues from all different backgrounds, not only the relationships with my colleagues, but with my students. Do y'all think we can do this job today? Yeah! Are we ready to rock? Ready to rock! I feel like once I build that rapport with them, I can do anything with them. I am a first-year teacher, and so as a first-year teacher, I'm looking for opportunities to grow and be the best at my craft that I can, and Fort Worth ISD provides several opportunities to do that. You are going to write the living and non-living elements that you see around us. We have great support through the admin through our campus. We have support that come in our classroom, and they give us effective feedback that we can automatically implement in our classroom. I would tell a teacher who is considering moving to Fort Worth, go for it. We love the Fort Worth atmosphere, the culture. We go downtown Fort Worth to Sundance Square. I'm still trying to recruit my friends to come to Fort Worth ISD because I want them in my family and in my community here.
This is what we're going to do first. You're going to pick out a book. I got a handful of books right here. Man, we got an initiative that we got going with the Fort Worth ISD. It's called a Reading with Barbers initiative, and all we're trying to do is get these children to read more.
I can't stop smiling because it's now coming to fruition, and you are becoming our community partners in helping us successfully launch this initiative.
Please don't splash, baby, baby, please, baby.
The excitement is that barbers will participate, and you know how many children come into the barbershop, especially our Fort Worth ISD students. They will be reading, and the barbers will encourage the students to read.
There's
a barbershop where everybody come to, the children, mothers, fathers, family. I think it's a good idea to help the children here to, instead of looking at iPads and cell phones all the time, they can sit here and read and better their mind.
So we gotta get ready for reading.
So you got to read to be successful in life, huh?
When you want to be something, you can actually read and then you'll be good at something.
Start right there. Reading gonna open up a part of the mind that they probably don't really use that much, the imagination part. So I think it should be good. You want to succeed in life, learn how to read. Need. N-E-E-D. Need. Good job, bro. Let's go. All right.
El lunes 21 de agosto es el primer día de escuela en Fort Worth ISD.
Welcome. This is our first day of school.
I like being able to help teachers. Think we can do that one?
I really love substitute teaching because it's an adventure.
I'm there for them whenever they need something. How can I help you? And that's it, being a team member in any school that you walk into.
I substitute teach because I know that there's a need for men in the school.
Are you measuring?
A good substitute teacher follows the directions the teacher leaves behind, keeps a class under good management, makes it feel like the teacher is there even though the teacher is not there.
In accordance with the open meetings law, the board opened the meeting at 4:33 p.m. in the boardroom with a quorum present, recessed and reconvened open session in the board conference room, adjourned regular session, convened executive session, adjourned executive session, and now reconvened open session at 6:10 p.m. in the boardroom with a quorum present. Do I have a motion accepting our consent agenda items? Was that Ms. Paz? Ms. Moss moves approval. Do I have a second? Ms. Paz seconds. Any discussion?
I've asked for a discussion. I'm going to vote against this because I do not approve of adding more money for Achieve 3000 when we have not seen the results. I think we ought to be able to see the results before we ask for an additional one. And I don't feel so strongly about this, but we're also spending a ton of money on a new math program, and we have no information about whether the kids are doing better in math or worse in. And this is, to me, is another example of just doing stuff because we feel like it rather than it being based on fact.
Okay.
So I'm voting next, no.
Thank you, Dr. Sutherland. Any other discussion? Hearing none, please move to voting. And the motion passes 8 yea, 1 nay. At this time, we'll move on to action items. We have personnel, and I'll hand that right on over to Dr. Scribner. Do I have a motion? Motion by Ms. Needham. Do we have a second?
Ms. Paz.
Ms. Paz, second. Any discussion? Aniel Livanos is second. With there being no discussion, please move to voting. It's just, we're going to move, who moved the motion? Will we agree that Ms. Needham moved the motion? Okay, and second will be Ms. Paz? Okay, for the record, Ms. Needham moved the motion and the second was Ms. Paz. You're welcome. Okay, and with no discussion, please move to voting as soon as your screen allows you to do so. And we're off. And the motion passes unanimously. At this time, I would like to hand the mic over to Dr. Scribner for personnel appointments, which is an exciting time for us.
Thank you very much, President Jackson, members of the board, and Fort Worth ISD school community. We are excited that we've been able to appoint tonight both elementary and secondary school site administrators. And with that, I'll turn it over to our chiefs. First, Chief of Elementary, Karen Molinar.
Thank you, Dr. Scribner and board. I'm happy to announce that Derek Butler is our new principal at Sagamore Hill Elementary. Mr. Butler, can you introduce your family?
Here's my mom and dad, Mr. Butler. This is my mom and dad, Lincoln Butler and Dorothy Butler. My 4 sons, no, my wife first. My wife, Sherry Butler, and my 4 sons, Derek, Deshaun, Dewan, and Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Butler.
Congratulations.
The new assistant principal at Lily B. Clayton will be Roberto Amaya.
Thank you for this opportunity. I'd like to introduce my wife, Sharon, my daughter, Victoria, Adriana, Daniel, and Allison, and Allison's boyfriend on the left.
We would like to welcome Patricia Garcia as the new assistant principal at Oak Lawn Elementary.
Thank you. I'd like to introduce my husband, Keith, my sister, Linda, my D. McRae family, Misty Lampkins, Kendall Miller.
That's our elementary appointments for this evening.
Thank you. And for secondary, our Chief of Secondary Schools, Dr. Cherie Washington.
Thank you, Dr. Scribner and board members. First, I'd like to introduce to you Miss Elsie Hortel. She'll be the assistant principal at Diamond Hill Jarvis High School.
Thank you. I'd like to introduce my husband, Scott Wartell, and my sisters-in-law, Julie and Jamie, and all four of us graduated from Diamond Hill High School, and I taught there about 23 years ago, so I'm so happy to be back at Diamond Hill. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I'd like to introduce to you Miss Paula Peterson. She will be the assistant principal at Northside High School.
Thank you. I have my mom, Helen, here, my daughters, Alexis and Lily, my principal, Antonio Martinez, my coworkers, and friends with me today.
Next, we have Miss Deandra Bivens. She will be the assistant principal at McLean Middle School.
Thank you. I have my husband, DeJuan Bivens, my mother, Bobby Evans, my best friend and my cousin, and my fabulous principal, Barbara Azuna.
Next, we have Miss Courtney Waite. She will be the assistant principal at McLean 6th grade.
Hi, I'm excited about this opportunity. Thank you. I'm here with my husband, Max Crockmall, and our kids, Eli and Raina, are at home tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Miss Crystal Colton. She'll be the assistant principal at Riverside Middle School.
I'm here with my husband that's also a coach in Fort Worth ISD, Tony Colton, my mother that helps me out with my 6 adorable kids, Caden Colton, and Cameron, Gabby, Christian that's getting ready to go to MSU next week, and Cassidy and Gabriel.
And finally, last but certainly not least, I'm excited to introduce Ms. Shane Woods, new assistant principal at Handley Middle School.
Well, I realize I don't have enough children, number one. But I have a 16-year-old who's at home recuperating from turning 16, so she's at home. So hi, mommy made it. And then I have Michael here for support, so thank you.
Those are your secondary assistant principal appointments.
Great, thank you so much. And I want to ask, can the student that will be attending MSU stand up? Let's give this student a round of applause. That is what we love to see in this boardroom. You guys are what it's about. Okay, at this time, any public comment from any board members? Hearing none, this meeting is now recessed. Will be called to order in the board conference room, as this board will be taking Lone Star Governance Training with A.J. Craybill, who is the Deputy Commissioner of Governance.
I could be the sergeant at arms and go wrestle him down.
The rest of our group, that seems to be.
Hello. Oh, wow. Now I've got a microphone. Thank you so much for inviting me up. It's always a pleasure to get a chance to connect with you all and share in some of the work. As many of you have heard me say before, we're very excited at the agency about a lot of the things that are happening in Fort Worth, the improvements, the reduction of low-performing campuses, the increases in achievement that you're seeing, and certainly always eager to celebrate with you. And any way that we can be supportive, whether it's offering some training like this evening as a refresher, or any other ways that you can see, my invitation is please never hesitate to call on us. I think a number of you have, my mobile phone, my email. You'll never call too early, too often, too late. We're here to serve. This evening, what I want to walk through is just a quick overview of some of the things that we worked on together during the Lone Star Governance two-day workshop that this board completed, and then make available time for asking of any questions, getting any clarification, anything that would help you be successful in this work. So to begin with, everyone has a card. I've placed these near your seats, so if you please reach out, find the card. It conveniently has two sides. We're going to use one side right now. We'll use the other side a little bit later. So what I invite you to do is think about why you serve. I want you to think about, what is it that really called you into service in this particular way. There is a condition that is not currently true for Fort Worth ISD, but that you want it to be true. And so I want you to imagine something that is not currently true for Fort Worth ISD, but it is your aspiration to have that become true as a result of your leadership, you as an individual member of the governing team, that through you, this thing that is currently not the case will become the case. Once you have that in mind, here's what I want you to do with your card. In 10 words or less, identify what it is that you most want to be remembered for having caused in Fort Worth ISD. There is something that you want to be remembered for having caused. It's not true now, it doesn't exist today, but through you and through your leadership, through your service, it will be called into existence. In 10 words or less, what is it that you want to be remembered for? What difference will you make? 10 words or less. Take a few moments. When you have those 10 words or less in mind, go ahead and write them down on one side of your card. There are circumstances that currently do not exist, conditions that are currently not true, but that you want them to be, and that you're committed to causing them into existence. As you think of what those circumstances or what those conditions might be, in 10 words or less, write them on one side of your card. There's not that many people in the audience, and there are certainly an awful lot of cards. So if anybody else here wants to play along, you are very welcome to do so. This is just as true of an inquiry for the people in the room, whether you be staff, whether you be parents, whether you be concerned community members. That the same conversation is true for everyone in the room, that there is a possible future for Fort Worth ISD. That future isn't here yet, but it can be. It can be through you and through your service, whether it's a staff, as a community member, a concerned parent, a member of the board. In 10 words or less, what will you be remembered for? I see a few pencils on the dais still moving. We'll give you about another 60 seconds. What is it that you want to create in Fort Worth ISD? 10 years from now, people will say, this is what's so. And when they think about that, they'll think of you. In 10 words or less, what would that be? All right, so a few people are still finishing up. Who will be the first to share? What were your 10 words or less? Yeah.
That all students were educated to be successful.
That all students were educated to be successful. Yeah. Who else? Yes.
All students have equitable opportunity to succeed in Fort Worth.
All students have equitable opportunity to succeed in Fort Worth. Yeah. All students will graduate. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Every student attends a high-performing and high-achieving school.
Every student attends a high-performing, high-achieving school. Anyone else? 10 words or less. Yeah.
Mine are considerably more modest.
Okay.
My goal was to
Provide stronger board leadership. Yeah. Anyone else? Yes.
Stable board, great schools, supportive culture.
Stable board, great schools, supportive culture.
Student achievement by having parents involved in their education.
I didn't hear you. I don't think your microphone came on.
Student achievement by having parents involved in their education.
Yeah, student achievement by having parents involved in their education. Yeah. Yeah.
Students of color educated and be successful as all other ethnic groups.
Students of color being educated and as successful as all other ethnic groups. Got it. All right, so we'll come back to that. So hold on to that. We'll need it later. So I noticed that you all have eaten. Lucky for you. However, I am hungry. I'll eat later. However, I'm hungry. What is the outcome that I want? No, no, and no. I'm hungry. What is the outcome I want? It's not food, and it's not to eat. To be satisfied, to be full. That's the outcome I want. Why is the outcome I'm hungry? Why is the outcome I want not to get food?
Because that's a way of reaching your outcome.
It's a way of getting it. If I got some food, does that guarantee that I'll feel full?
No.
No. There's a difference between the outcome that I want, feeling full, and actually having some food or being fed. Like, being fed is an important strategy, but it's not the outcome that I want. There's a significant difference between what are the strategies we use to accomplish an outcome and the actual outcome itself. And so let's imagine that the strategy I want to use to feel full, because the outcome I want is to feel full, so we're clear about the outcome. Let's imagine the strategy I want to accomplish that is a peanut butter jelly sandwich. What are the inputs I need to execute that strategy? Say what?
The ingredients you need.
Like what?
Peanut butter, jelly, is that what you're saying?
Peanut butter and jelly. So you are familiar with the recipe. Well done. Well done. Well, what are the other inputs that I will need if the strategy I want to feel full is to eat a peanut butter jelly sandwich? What other inputs will I need? Peanut butter and jelly, definitely. What else? Bread.
Knife.
A knife.
Or your finger.
Or if you're a pacifist, you could use your finger.
Yeah.
Any other inputs that I would need?
You need to prepare it.
So actually it would take some time, some of my time to actually prepare the sandwich. That's an input into this strategy. Yeah, it makes perfect sense. All right, but you get to this point, Ms. Moss, that's somewhat important, that somebody would actually have to do it. So let's imagine that I am hopelessly lazy. I have no desire to make these sandwiches. Moreover, I have a lot of children. I don't want to make a bunch of peanut butter jelly sandwiches every day for all these children. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to hire somebody to make the peanut butter jelly sandwiches for me. So now I've got all these inputs. I've got somebody that I've hired to make the peanut butter jelly sandwiches. I have 10 fingers. I have peanut butter. I have jelly. I have bread. But what I really want to know is before my children get to the point of feeling full, so that's way down the road. Right now I've got all these inputs. What I really want is a way of measuring the effectiveness of these inputs prior to getting all the way to the outcome. The outcome may be a few hours away. I want a way of measuring the effectiveness of these inputs in the middle of that process. What are ways I can measure the effectiveness of this peanut butter jelly sandwich creation process in the middle of it? Before my children get to the point of feeling full, what's a way that I can measure the effectiveness of this strategy in the middle?
How hungry were they?
So they're coming up with some way of trying to figure out how hungry they are. Maybe that's it. What's a way I can measure the effectiveness of this strategy in the middle? Yeah.
Determining how many ingredients have been utilized or how much of the product have been utilized.
Okay, this sounds very technical. She said, okay, so we've got this much peanut butter, and we want to know exactly how much of that peanut butter is utilized per sandwich.
I just want to know if any of it's been utilized because you told me someone was lazy in the house.
Oh, yeah. Is any of it utilized?
I don't know. I got another person's working.
Maybe they're just making jelly sandwiches instead of peanut butter jelly sandwiches. So we might audit the sandwiches to figure out what we're working with.
No, we don't have to weigh it, I promise. I just want to see if it's got a little.
No. She brought it up. We might weigh the sandwiches. Is this a quarter pounder peanut butter jelly sandwich?
Could.
Yeah. What are ways that we might measure the effectiveness of the strategy in the middle of it? What are ways that we might measure the effectiveness of the strategy?
While they're eating,
Mm-hmm.
how long it takes to make the sandwich?
Yeah, so if this is, 1 hour per sandwich, I'm going to spend a whole lot of money paying for a bunch of sandwiches as opposed to if they can whip them out pretty quickly. And so trying to figure out what is the frequency with which sandwiches can be constructed. Got it? What are ways of measuring the effectiveness of this strategy in the middle before we know the result?
How many sandwiches it take to fill the?
Yeah, maybe we'd try to figure out some way of knowing how many sandwiches do we estimate it'll take for a given child to feel full. And then try to figure out, do we have an adequate number of sandwiches given the ingredients? Yeah.
What about the quality of the ingredients?
The quality of the ingredients, oh great. So now we're going to get into this argument about crunchy versus creamy.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Market Pantry versus Jif.
Market Pantry versus Jif.
There you go.
Yeah, but there are ways of evaluating the quality of the ingredients to try to figure out did we purchase the right ingredients. If all the kids hate crunchy peanut butter and that's all we bought, this probably isn't going to work out so well.
Right.
Yeah, this makes sense. And so we look at the quality of the individual ingredients. We look at the craftsmanship. Did they cut the edges off or not? Was it an even distribution of peanut butter jelly? We could weigh the sandwich to figure out, are we giving away too much peanut butter on each of these sandwiches? These are all ways that we can know. Why would we want to know? Why would we want to be able to measure the effect of our strategies in the middle as opposed to waiting until the end? Why would we want to know the effectiveness of our strategies in the middle?
So if the strategies in the middle, if they're not working,
Yeah.
then we'll have an opportunity to change strategies.
Yeah. If it's not working, you have opportunity to change. Once the game's over and you know the outcome of the game, can the coach still impact the game?
Game is over.
No, the game's over. It's too late. It's too late to impact it. We'd want a scoreboard. We'd want some way of knowing in the middle of the game, at halftime, are we still in this thing or not?
So how you measure your progress.
Yeah.
Before the end.
You'd want some type of progress measures to try to ascertain in the middle of the game, are we still in this, coach? And if we're down by 25 points at halftime, what are we going to do to get back in this game? You'd want to know that. You wouldn't want to wait until the very end. You'd want to know that in the middle. These measures that we use in the middle, we refer to as outputs. And so we've got 3 big buckets of ideas here. We've got inputs. These are the strategies that we invest in. We've got the outputs. These are measures of the inputs. And then we've got the outcomes. This is what we're actually trying to create at the end of the day. As you think about a school system, what are examples of inputs in a school system? What are some of the inputs in a school system?
Teachers.
Teachers. The single most important input is the quality of instruction in the classroom. Nothing is more important than that. You can have everything else happen perfectly in your school system. If there is not high quality instruction, all the other things will not cause your children to be successful. The single most important variable is the quality of instruction. It's an important input. Also because humans constitute probably about 85% of your budget. What are other important inputs in a school system?
The culture.
The culture might be an input. Yeah.
Facilities.
The facilities. You have school buildings. I suspect you consider these to be somewhat important input into the overall education process. What are the inputs? People, buildings.
Supplies.
Yeah, a lot of supplies. Pencils, pens, paper, notepads, fancy wireless microphones.
Transportation.
Computers. Transportation is an important input. Can we get the children from their neighborhood to where we're going to educate them? Other inputs in the school system.
Lunch.
Training.
Lunch.
Lunch, yes. Peanut butter and jelly sandwiches are probably important input in the school system. Quite.
Heat and light.
Yeah.
That's pretty much it.
Yeah, environmental.
Leadership also.
Heat and light.
Leadership.
Yeah, leadership is important input. Yeah, the key determinant of whether or not you'll be able to attract, recruit, retain high-quality teachers is, do you have high-quality building leaders who are supporting them? Money is an important input. Money is a very important input. The budget is a very critical input for the school system. Okay, so those are inputs. How about outputs? What are the ways that we measure the effectiveness of the inputs in the middle of the process? In a school system, what are some of the outputs? What are the output measures? So STAR might be an output measure. It depends on how we describe success, but it might be.
For our core subjects, we measure very often, I'd like to say once a week, but once a month for sure, in both reading and mathematics.
What type of instrument do you use to do that measuring?
They buy them and then they employ them. We have Action 3000. You have to help me here because I complain about it.
Achieve 3000?
Achieve 3000.
See, you like it now.
I voted against it. And we have one for math, and they do, they compare this to month, they grade it on month to month and month to month.
Yeah, so you have these
But
output
the
measures.
teacher is- The kids are growing more or less than month to month. You probably
Yeah.
know this. It's the way we do things these days.
The testing.
In elementary, especially during reading, at elementary, early elementary grade.
So you have these various assessments that I hear you say that occur at least on a monthly basis in your core subjects.
Yes.
And those assessments would be some of your outputs. Got it.
Well, they're measurements.
Other examples of outputs in a school system.
How many kids are graduating?
Graduation rate could be an output, could be, depending on how you, it depends on how you define the outcome. But graduation rates could be an output. What other outputs?
Dropout, right?
Dropout rate could be an output. Other outputs, other ways of measuring the effectiveness of your inputs in a school system.
On-time attendance,
Yeah.
mobility.
Mobility, on-time attendance. I submit to you your annual audit is probably, depending on how you score success, is either output or an outcome. So those are things that you know in the middle of the process. What are the outcomes that the district produces? What are the important outcomes that the district produces?
Graduate.
Graduates. Graduates might be an outcome. What else?
Literacy, readers.
That students are actually literate. The level of literacy for the district might be an outcome.
Scholarship money.
Scholarship money. Yeah, how are they going to be in debt or are they getting paid to go to school? Yeah.
How many students are enrolled in college?
How many students are actually enrolled in college? Not just did they walk across our stage, but did they actually get into somebody else's classroom afterward?
We never measure that.
Say what?
We never measure that.
So it's not something you measure now, but it's something you could measure.
No, we don't. I mean, I don't mean we, the Fort Worth School District, I mean the educational establishment nationwide, they do not check.
Got it. Other outcomes, yeah.
How many students are promoted? How many students are retained?
Yeah, promotion rates and retention rates of students in a particular grade. Yeah, so we've got inputs, outputs, outcomes. All right, so now we go back to the card. Time for everybody to play along.
Same card or
Now you get to flip it over to the other side. So you have one side that's got 10 words or less. Now on the other side, what I want you to do is, when did school let out?
June 1st or thereabouts.
First week of June?
Yeah.
What I want you to do is I want you to think of all of the times that the board has come together since school let out. Do you have committees here? You got committee meetings? Did you have special meetings in that time? Did you have work sessions in that time? Did you have regular board meetings in that time? I want you to think of all of the minutes that the board has met.
Minutes?
I want you to think of all of the minutes that the board has spent meeting since school let out. I want you to think of all of the minutes that the board has met since school let out,
including this meeting.
including this one.
Judy's got her calendar.
Including
And-
committees, you stated?
Including any time when the board was meeting. And that definitely includes
3
committees.
meetings in June, 1 in July, I think.
He says, yeah.
We met 6 times in a
Yes,
row,
we did.
June and July with the budget.
As a collective.
Yeah, class collective.
If you had special meetings, if you had special workshops, all of that. I want you to think of all of that. And once you have that in your mind, here's what I want you to do. I want you to write down 3 numbers on the other side of your card. These 3 numbers, when added together, will equal 100. What I want you to write on the back side of your card is what is the percentage of all of those minutes that the board spent on inputs? What is the percentage of all of those minutes that the board spent on outputs? And what is the percentage of all those minutes that the board spent on outcomes? To help you out a little bit, inputs are resources and activities invested in a particular program or strategy, usually knowable at the beginning of a cycle, a measure of effort applied. Outputs are a result of a particular set of inputs, usually knowable in the midst of a cycle, a measure of the implementation of the program or strategy itself. And outcomes, the impact of the program or strategy, usually knowable at the end of the cycle, a measure of the effect of the intended beneficiary. What I want you to do is write down 3 numbers on the flip side of your card. Of all the minutes this board has spent meeting, what percentage of those minutes were spent on inputs? What percentage of those minutes were spent on outputs? What percentage of those minutes were spent on outcomes? Those 3 numbers together should equal 100. Go ahead and take a few minutes. For those of you playing along at home or in the audience, don't be surprised. Sometimes in education we do this thing called cold calling.
You're asking me this stuff.
Just 3 numbers.
Particular set of inputs usually knowable.
Inputs, outputs, and outcomes.
Implementation of the program or strategy itself.
Write down 3 numbers. When added together, they should equal 100% of the board's time spent. Now the question is, how much of it was spent on inputs? How much of it was spent on outputs? And how much of it was spent on outcomes?
And you're speaking of what we're supposed to be following in governance.
Oh, so what we're doing now is we're reflecting on the amount of, on all the minutes that the board has spent together since school let out. The question is, how were those minutes spent? Were they spent focused on inputs, on outputs, on outcomes? Take a few moments, write down your 3 numbers. There's no judgment here. There's no judgment here. This is a reflection activity. The opportunity is to simply write down, as we reflect, on our use of time as a board. Was it spent on inputs, outputs, outcomes, and how much?
It's not exec session.
No, we're open. It's
Folks back here in the chief seats, any questions? We getting our 3 numbers? Please check your neighbor, make sure they actually equal 100. All right, it looks like people are getting pretty close to the end. So who will be the first to share the percentage of the board's minutes spent on inputs? On
I will.
inputs. Yeah, so just for inputs, what is your number?
I said 65.
65, got it. All right. Who else? Who will share next?
I said 85.
85? We got 65, 85? Yeah. 60?
It is supposed to total 100.
It has to equal 100.
Just the first one.
Just inputs. The percentage of time that you put down as being spent on inputs. Yes, sir.
I said 5.
You said 40? Gotcha.
I said 50.
50?
60.
60?
70.
You said 95?
Because I think we spend all our time spending money.
Young man in the corner. 40? Got it. What'd you come up with, Sue?
70.
70. All right. All right. So now we've got this inputs, outputs, outcomes thing on lock. Now we need to add a little bit more complication to it, though. Because I invite you to consider there are 2 types of outcomes that school districts produce. Student outcomes, outcomes that describe what students know or are able to do, and other outcomes, any outcomes that aren't student outcomes. What's an example of an outcome that the district produces that is not a student outcome? Pretty much anything related to teachers, teacher salary, teacher attendance, teacher anything. Those aren't student outcomes. Those don't describe what a student knows or is able to do. So they're important outcomes that a district produces. They're just not student outcomes. Got it. What are other examples of other outcomes that aren't student outcomes? Promotions? Facilities. Your bond. Yeah. So here's what I want you to do. Now you'll jump back in here, and underneath your outcomes, you're going to break that down into 2 categories. So now you have 2 numbers. These 2 numbers will equal 100. What percentage of your time spent on outcomes was focused on student outcomes versus other outcomes? So as you think about all the time you spent on outcomes, so say you spent 10% of your time on outcomes, now you're asking, of that 10%, what percentage of that was spent on student outcomes, engaged in conversation and discussion and really diving into the data around what students know or are able to do versus other outcomes? And those two numbers should equal 100. Then we'll do some fancy on-the-fly math here in a minute.
Cool. That's what we do here. It's one of our goals, so do you remember?
All right, so, yes, sir.
If I had 40% of the person, that means I have to have 60 for student.
So if you said 40% for other outcomes, then that means 60% for student outcomes, yeah. The math ain't working out for you, huh? All right, yes, ma'am. So let's go straight to student outcomes. So now the question is, what percent did you put down for student outcomes out of the total outcomes? Yeah. You put 10. Okay, so now if you put 10% down for student outcomes, what percent did you have down for outcomes overall? So you had inputs, outputs, outcomes. What percentage of time was outcomes? So outcomes overall was 10%.
So it's 1%.
And then of that 10%, 10% of that was spent on student outcomes. Is that one? Is that 1%?
Yep.
I told you we were going to do some fancy math here, folks. So what you're saying is that of inputs, outputs, outcomes, but break that down to other outcomes and student outcomes, what you're saying is since school let out, your observation of the board is that 1% of the overall time has been spent on student outcomes. Is that what did I hear you correctly? Who else? When you look at the overall percentage of your time focused on student outcomes, what is that percentage? Yeah.
Mine was 100% more than Miss Needham's. I get 2%.
2%. Hey.
When I did the fancy math.
Winner, winner, chicken dinner. We're all the way up to 2%.
Hey, that's good. You might have chicken tonight.
Who else? What percent did you come up with for student outcomes? 1%? 3%? Uh-oh. Fancy superintendents. They can count all the way up to 3. 1%? All right. So, I want you to take a moment and compare the percentage of time that you've described for student outcomes to what you wrote in your 10 words on the other side. And as you compare these two phenomenon, what are you noticing?
They're not aligned. That I'm a really good dreamer.
A really good dreamer,
Yeah.
perhaps not the greatest doer in terms of alignment. I heard you say that the two for you just simply weren't aligned. As you compare the percentage of time that you've described that the board spends on student outcomes to what you wrote on the other side of the card, what are you noticing? So hold on. Some of y'all know how I roll, so we're going to flip this up. Make that an I statement.
I believe that we will.
Make that an I statement.
I
Believe that I.
believe I will not see all students of color successful upon graduation by looking at the amount of time we spend on students.
The amount of time that I spend.
The amount of time that I spend on student outcomes.
Yeah, I believe that what I said is that I want all children, regardless of ethnicity, to be really successful. And as I begin to reflect on my use of time in this board meeting, I'm beginning to see that's not going to happen. Yeah. As you reflect on both sides of your note card, what are you noticing? Who will share next? What are you noticing? Yeah.
I cannot build a supportive culture until I am more intentional about focusing on student achievement.
I can't build a supportive culture until I'm more intentional about focusing on student achievement. Yeah. As you reflect on the two sides of your card, what are you noticing? Yes.
I cannot see all students graduate until I spend more time on
outcomes.
I cannot,
Student outcomes.
I can't expect to see all students graduate until I spend more time really focused on student outcomes. Yeah. Anyone else? As you reflect on the two sides of your card, what are you noticing? Is there anyone else? Right now, this side is winning. Not that it's a competition. Yeah.
I do not believe that all schools are perceived to be and are excellent.
I do not perceive that all schools are perceived as and believed to be excellent. Okay, got it. Yeah.
I need to work harder so that I am participating in the construction of an agenda that's focused on student outcomes.
I need to work harder so that I'm participating in the construction of an agenda that's focused on student outcomes. Yeah.
What was the question?
As you reflect on the two sides of your note card, one side has 10 words that describe the future that you want to create for the children in this community, and the other side describes the percentage of your time that you spend focusing on what that future is. The question is, as you notice the both sides of your card, what do you notice?
I can give an iMessage, but as usual, it's not in response to what you want.
So if it's true for you, then that's absolutely what I want.
Okay.
Is it true for you?
I am struggling to help our superintendent work with us to be more effective.
I'm struggling to help my superintendent work with us to be more effective. Yeah.
And I think
Is this true for you?
Yes.
Make it a nice statement.
I'm doing the best I can. It's not much. but-
I'm doing the best I can.
What?
Got it.
What?
No, she's handling her business. She's doing good. She doesn't need any help. She's got it.
Yeah. See, I know that you know this, but our job is to pass the budget, make policy. Can't remember the third one. Hire a superintendent, right. So, to me, these questions are significant, but I see the responsibility, the hard part of the success is trying to help the superintendent implement these things.
Yeah, let me clarify one.
Now, student performance is not one of our jobs.
Yeah, it's absolutely it is by state statute.
It's the school's job.
It is the responsibility of the trustees to improve student outcomes.
That's not what it says in the state law, unless I'm mistaken.
Anybody have a copy of the, well,
I don't have it with me. Our attorney, our attorneys know about other things.
the attorneys are worried about many things, yes.
Yeah, which
1566. Doo-ba-doo-ba-doo. Let us read. I will read it for you because this is important, because what you just said is actually the commonly held belief of trustees across the state. It is a very commonly held belief. And so it's not by accident that you've come to believe that. I'm certain at some point someone has gone out and said this much. Here's what it says.
That's what Casby told us.
Texas Education Code 11.1515 says, oversight of academic achievement. The Board of Trustees of an independent school district, or the governing body of an open enrollment charter school, shall provide of a school district or the governing body of an open enrollment charter school shall provide oversight regarding student academic achievement and strategic leadership for maximizing student performance. That is your job.
Well, that's part of the policy.
No, I'm not discounting the other things are also part of your job. You have a complicated job. What I am clearly saying is that improving student outcomes by statute is part of your job. There's nothing in here that describes that being a delegable phenomenon. That is the work of the board, is to improve student outcomes. Yeah, no, this is important because this needs to be clear. And to your point, it hasn't always been clear. What I just read hasn't always been a part of Texas Education Code. Unfortunately. Yeah, it's been added, but
Do you know?
yeah, this year.
Okay.
Yeah, I would argue morally this has always been the case.
Right.
But it was never codified. But it's there now.
Yeah. Okay.
This is Texas Education Code 11.1515. The Board of Trustees of an independent school district shall provide oversight regarding student academic achievement and strategic leadership for maximizing student performance. Your job is to improve student outcomes. Now the question is, how much of your time are you going to invest in doing the most critical job to which you've been assigned? Right now, you're investing, it sounds like, somewhere between 0 and 3%, depending on if you're generous or not generous. And what I'm inviting you to consider is there may be a disconnect between the aspirations that you described on one side of the card and the actions, the adult behaviors on the other side. But fortunately, there is a solution for this phenomenon. Student outcomes don't change until adult behaviors change. It's both as simple as complicated as that. Student outcomes don't change until adult behaviors change. Said differently, the student outcomes that you are producing right now at a school system are in perfect alignment with the current set of adult behaviors in this room. Is there any lack of
I've been
clarity?
through this before.
Yeah.
I don't agree with it. And there's no literature that shows that it's true.
No, there's just the student outcome data.
Yeah, but that's caused by a lot of other things under the control of the superintendent. I don't want to get into an argument about it. I go through this before.
Excellent. So there is a question about what does the research say? The research, and when I say the research, we'll provide you with all the links to the research as well as a document that catalogs a bunch of the research that's on the TEA website. That being said, the research describes 3 adult behaviors of trustees that are most closely correlated with improvements in student outcomes. Adult behavior number 1 is, are we collaboratively setting student outcome goals? Adult behavior number 2 is, are we identifying these non-negotiable student outcome goals? And adult behavior number 3 is, are we monitoring our collaboratively set non-negotiable student outcome goals? What this really describes is that as a board, we've taken the time to articulate these are our student outcome goals. We've come up with some goal progress measures that we can use to monitor those on a regular basis. And then we spend half of all of our meetings actually monitoring progress toward our student outcome goals. And essentially what it's suggesting is the things that get monitored get done. Right now, you are effectively monitoring whether or not the peanut butter is crunchy or smooth. Here's a question. If you know with unwavering doubt whether the peanut butter is crunchy or smooth, will that ever give you definitive information as to whether or not your children are full? No. Knowing the quality of the peanut butter is never going to be a proxy. Knowing the quality of the inputs will never be a proxy for understanding the outcomes. It doesn't mean you don't want to know them. It just means it's not the same thing as knowing the outcomes. That's all. And so what you've described is that you're spending a lot of time evaluating and measuring the peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And I'm not suggesting that that is an important use of time. What I'm suggesting is you've decided to spend, depending on who we listen to, somewhere between 40 to 97% of your time measuring the sandwich. And all I'm suggesting is that what research seems to conclude is that doing so doesn't reveal whether or not your students are actually full. It doesn't reveal whether or not the student outcomes that you want are actually being met. That these are 2 different phenomena. Both have importance, but they're not the same thing. Before we continue, what are you hearing so far in this conversation?
Yes.
Yeah.
That student achievement will not improve until we spend all our time focused on that, on student achievement.
Yeah, I heard you said student achievement will not improve until we spend all of our time focused on it. I wouldn't say all. I'd definitely say preferably half. I mean, if what you want is the future that you wrote on the other side of your card, getting there, it is very unlikely that, basically, what the research is suggesting is that an alignment of adult behaviors matters, and that whatever the adults at the top of the organization are spending their time focusing on, the rest of the adults throughout the organization will spend their time focusing on as well. And so if you are focusing on the crunchiness of the peanut butter, then there will be a lot of reports relative to crunch. And And that's not a good thing or a bad thing or right thing or wrong thing. That's not the nature of the conversation. It just means that's what you will know. What you won't know is, are your children full? More importantly, because that is your focus, that will be the focus of your organization as well. That's what the research is bearing out, is that leadership actually matters. There are really only two schools of thought on this. Either leadership matters or leadership doesn't matter. What the research tends to suggest is that leadership actually does matter, that what leaders do makes a difference, whether it be campus leaders, district leaders, or governing leaders, that leadership matters. And so then the question is, if it matters, which specific adult behaviors of leadership matter the most as it relates to improving student outcomes? These are they. Yeah.
Well, then it goes back to adult behaviors.
Yeah.
Not until they change will you be successful.
Whose adult behaviors?
Our, everybody, yes, really. The adult behaviors in the system.
Which particular adult do you directly control?
Well, the statement was, student outcomes will not change until adult behaviors change.
Yeah.
Now, I'm talking about those adult behaviors in the statement, which is in the system.
Mm-hmm. But sitting here right now tonight, which adult do you get to control? Yeah.
I'm the only one I can control, so my behavior,
Yeah.
You controlled mine a little earlier in the evening.
No.
Yeah.
I don't mind crossing anybody, but I can't cross.
Hey, Mama Moss is tough. She's tough. She is tough.
I'll add another
Yeah.
thing while you're in a good mood. What part of what I object to
Yeah.
in this whole discussion is a lack of focus on what I call, actually one of my Harvard bosses used to say, the leverageable variance.
Mhm.
And if the public were willing to concede what the fact really is, and you'll find it if you go online and ask for it, that the 50% of the variance in student achievement is related to exogenous factors and has nothing to do with the school. And within the school, as you know, within the district, we're looking at 10 to 15%, and the rest is unmeasurable variance. So what bothers me is when people come, and I think we can do a lot better, I really do, okay? And actually, I think we're getting there, which is kind of amazing to me. But what bothers me is the idea that the school board is, as you said back in January, is responsible, 80% responsible for what happens, when in fact, we aren't.
No, I never said that. What you're probably thinking about are the goal progress measures, and what we say in the goal progress measures is that you wouldn't want to select one that the superintendent doesn't have at least 80% control over, and that is correct. You would not want to select something to hold him accountable for that he doesn't actually have control over. So for example, he doesn't have control over poverty in the community. He doesn't have control over parental behavior, he doesn't have control over housing conditions, he doesn't have control over inequitable access to
He doesn't have
food.
control over student achievement because most of it happens outside the school.
But he has control over the inputs in this school system.
Right, but if we measure him based on outputs of student performance, we're going back to the 100 by 30, 100 by 25, sorry. And I mean, the superintendent does not have the capacity, and neither does the board, to have every person in this district, every one of our 88,000 kids, succeed at the same level. It doesn't, if it does exist, no one knows about it. And so, I hope I'm not being too difficult, but I would like us to focus on things that we can have control over.
Yes.
And I feel like we're working on it.
Yeah,
In some ways, we're doing better.
The things that you have to focus on are truly the things that you have control over.
Right.
You don't have control over, whether the sun comes up tomorrow or not. And so that's not something to be focused on. What there is to be focused on is to maximize
Right.
the things over which you do have control.
Correct.
So if you are comfortable with 1% of your time being focused on improving on student outcomes, then keep doing that. If you are not comfortable with that, then all there is to do is to change that particular adult behavior. What that doesn't mean is that all of a sudden unicorns, come prancing, through the streets of Fort Worth. I mean, there are no magic bullets in public education. What there is to focus on the things that we can control, that we have some research basis to ascertain really do make a difference in improving student outcomes. And when adults actually focus on student outcomes, that makes a difference. When adults focus on the inputs, that makes less of a difference. A teacher can tell all the students in the classroom, here is the objective for the day. And that'll have some value in the classroom. Say about this much.
We have that on the wall of
Or
our
a student can write it, or the teacher can write it on the wall of the classroom and refer to it using roughly the same amount of time, and it'll have this much impact. What changed is the adult behavior. Same unit of time. In one situation, they wrote it down. They said it verbally. In the other situation, they wrote it down. The reason I can go to almost every classroom in your buildings and see it written down is because somewhere, somebody did the science. And what they wound up with is, hey, you know what? This adult behavior has a larger impact on improving student outcomes than that adult behavior. The same people who did that science did this science. Adult behavior matters. Yeah, as you're reflecting on this conversation, what are you hearing so far?
What we do makes a difference in students.
What I do. Yeah. What I do makes a difference. If you don't believe that, then there's no point in being here. We can pack it up and go home. But what I hear you saying is that what I do actually does matter. That I can be the cause for something great in the lives of students. And that's why it's worth my time to be here. Yeah, as you're listening to this conversation, what are you hearing? Who else? Yeah.
I can facilitate or I can inhibit.
Yeah, I can facilitate or I can inhibit. Say more about that.
Or be a substrate.
Yeah.
Slow progress, you can just keep it the same.
Yeah.
You can blow it out of the water. We need to blow it out of the water.
Yeah, absolutely. What are you hearing in this conversation? Who else?
I can build a supportive culture in my district until I model that supportive behavior.
Yeah, I can't build a supportive culture in my district until I model that myself. That leadership matters, and when people see behavior from leaders, they're likely to mirror that behavior. Yeah, absolutely. Anyone else? What are you hearing in this conversation? Yes, sir.
I cannot see the student achievement until I focus more time on the student.
I can't expect to see improvements in student achievement until I focus more time on student outcomes. Let's take a quick time out because I promised some of the people in the audience that we'd hear from them. What are you hearing in this conversation? And remember, the rule is it has to be an I statement, so we're not talking about these people, we're talking about you. What are you hearing in this conversation so far? Don't be bashful.
Hearing that leadership matters.
Yeah, the leadership matters. Got it. Starting with who? Starting with myself, yeah. Anyone else? What are you hearing in this conversation?
As an adult, what I focus on at the top of the organization is trickling down to what other adults are focusing on.
Yeah, as an adult at the top of the organization, what I'm focusing on is trickling down to other adults in the organization. Absolutely, absolutely. Anyone else? What are you hearing?
If I allow my work to be distracted, then I will allow myself to become a distraction and not a positive impact on students.
Yeah, if I allow my work to be distracted, then I'm actually creating a distraction for others as well. Yeah. Anyone else? What are you hearing?
If I expect outcomes, I have to make sure that I put the inputs in and I have to measure them and monitor them so that I get the outcomes I wish to achieve.
Yeah, if there's outcomes I want, I actually have to monitor those outcomes. Like, it's not enough just to wish about the outcomes. I actually have to go back and monitor it. Yeah, we inspect what we expect. Yeah, anyone else?
I'm hearing collaboration
Yeah.
is a behavior that is very important in order to affect student outcomes.
Collaboration is a behavior that's very important to affect and to improve student outcomes. Thank you all for sharing. Besides winning, again, not competition, just checking in. Anybody else? Didn't want to leave Amelia out.
I need to maximize the thing over which I have control.
I need to maximize the thing over which I have control. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for being in the conversation with
I
us.
was going to say something. I have to add something, if you don't mind.
Of course, of course.
You know, I've been fighting you for 17 hours now, or whatever it's been.
Mhm.
And I know what I don't mind, I don't mind the emphasis on student performance, okay? Or an emphasis on student,
Mhm.
it's like our report card. But my mantra is very different than, I regard the emphasis on testing as a nefarious effort to control the schools by people who are not always the friends of children.
Yeah, I heard you say that you regard the focus on testing as a nefarious effort to control schools by people who are not invested in education.
Yeah.
Did I hear you correctly?
Yes, I did. Now I want to finish my sentence, or my paragraph. So may I refer to my great hero, Jaime Escalante.
Mhm.
And I think I don't have this on my signature anymore. But if you recall, his mantra was, I'm not worried. Do you know who he was? He's been dead for a while. I'm not worried about this test. I'm worried about the rest of your life.
Yeah, so.
And that is why he was a good.
So what outcome would you like the board to be focused on?
I don't know how to do that. It's just you have to be that.
Yeah, and so one thing to make really clear, raise your hand if you have heard me say focus on tests.
Well, that's all we talk about.
That, you talk about what you choose to talk about. So what I'm suggesting is that we have some reasonable evidence that student outcomes don't change until adult behaviors change. It is not my job at the state, nor anyone else's job at the state, to dictate you which outcomes you want to focus on as a board. That is literally your job, is to collaboratively set those student outcome goals. And so whatever you all set, that's what you said. So as I think of some boards who've gone through this work, what they've said is actually exactly what you said earlier, is they said the goal that we set, the outcome that we want to monitor, is what percentage of our students are still on track to graduate 2 years into college. And they're actually going to invest the resources as an ISD to figure out how to track that. Why? Because that's the outcome that they think is important. Is that a test? No. Is it a test of what those students are capable of, know, or able to do? Absolutely. But is it a standardized test? No. And so the outcomes that you focus on, that's a you thing. If you don't like the outcomes you're focused on, talk to your colleagues. What matters is that you identify the outcomes that you think are important and that you do spend a reasonable amount of time on them if those are important to you. If student outcomes is not, I don't think you should focus on student outcomes because the law says so. I think that's a horrible reason to focus on student outcomes. I think you do it because that's the moral thing to do. But if you want to have an impact on improving student outcomes, you actually are going to have to spend a certain amount of time on it. And what we recommend as a state is that you organize yourself such that half of your time is spent focused on that, as opposed to whatever quantity of time that you're spending right now. We haven't yet heard from everyone. Anyone else? What are you hearing in this conversation so far? Yes, thank you for raising your hand, young man.
I continue to be frustrated.
Yeah, I continue to be frustrated. Oh, by what?
By the lack of focus on student outcomes.
Yeah, I continue to be frustrated by the lack of focus on student outcomes. It's an important thing to notice. It's an important thing to notice that this has produced a sense of frustration for you. And inside of that frustration, the invitation is to translate it into a new set of adult behaviors. The good news is, if you want partnership in that, that's literally part of my job at the agency, is to offer support in that. What frequently happens as I travel around the state is that most boards find themselves in the situation that you just described, wanting this for students, but actually focusing on this only this much. but not really having a clear sense of how do we get from here to here. Like they'd really rather come to a board meeting and spend more time really trying to get an authentic sense of where their student's at. But that's not how they spend their time, and often they don't know how to get from point A to point B. What I'm suggesting is that if that's something that you ever need assistance in, the agency is one, your Education Service Center, which has people who are trained in this work as well now, stand ready to assist. To be clear, this is not it's not an easy journey, otherwise everyone would do it, but it is doable. Yeah.
And one example is you gave us some great technical ideas in the training. You presented opportunities for adaptive ideas. There's been some movement on some of that, so it's not complete disregard of the process that we've been engaged in. But one that was a technical that you offered, which I think would have cleared up a lot. Initial conversation was that we could have gotten the agenda review a week ahead of time, and we projected that would take 2 months. We're now in August, and I've heard every excuse in the world on why we still can't do it, or why we still need more time. And that continues to add to the distrust of the basic little things within this boardroom. Those technical things are the ones that I'm frustrated with that are beyond my control, right? We can continue to ask and ask and ask, but until that gets addressed, you know, I think some of those technical things will really begin to alleviate a lot of the pressure and really clarify the communication. But excuses keep coming, and justifications keep coming, and I have no positional power over that as one individual trustee. So that's just an example of how
So
the technical things that you offered still haven't been implemented, and continue to produce and fester the same issues that we've had before we did the training in January.
So what I heard you say is that there are some technical aspects of organizing the governing work that you all have been offered, and some of it has been pursued, but there are still some pieces of that framework that have not yet been implemented, and that's a frustration to you. I heard you use the word trust, that it has an impact on trust, and that if those technical issues were addressed, that for you it would make it easier to be focused on student outcomes. I want to make sure, did I hear you correctly?
You heard that right, and my belief is that of my 4 years of experience, my strong belief is that a lot of pressure would be alleviated from simple technical things being addressed.
Yeah, so on that point, because I definitely want to be responsive, to the concern, is that there are a number of behaviors that we've identified as either research-based or as just simply best practice. What you're describing, I don't have a research base for it, but is absolutely identified as best practice. That what happens is the board receives its materials sufficiently in advance that it can submit questions, and that whole process can occur in a way that limits the amount of time that you need to focus on it in a boardroom, so that you can free up time to be focused on monitoring progress towards student outcomes. So I want to highlight the only value in doing what you just described is that it would free up time of the board to be focused on improving student outcomes, to be really monitoring your progress towards student outcomes. So if you do all of that, and then you backfill that saved time with more inputs, because it sounds like inputs is what you all are supremely competent at spending time on. So if you save time from inputs and then backfill it with more inputs, then you actually haven't accomplished anything. That particular technical piece won't help you. And so that's why the first step, and I don't know the extent to which you've done this, the first step is collaboratively setting your non-negotiable student outcome goals. So how many goals, student outcome goals, has the board adopted? 3. Excellent. The next step is setting your goal progress measures, because this is how you monitor your collaboratively set non-negotiable goals. For each of your student outcome goals, have you adopted goal progress measures for them? Yes. Okay, so you've got the building blocks for this, it sounds like. Now you're actually going to have to choose as a board to organize yourselves such that you are spending half of your time actually paying attention to those rather than others. If you've done these other pieces, then yes, I tend to agree that those technical aspects might actually help you. And if what the board would like is some support in how to operationalize some of that, it's a process I've been through multiple times, and I'm certainly happy to assist. But to clarify, for the trustees, the expectation inside of what I was raising is that the administration makes public all of the items on the agenda 7 days in advance. Then the board has several days to submit questions. The board submits whatever questions it has about all of these items. Because remember, pretty much by definition, almost all the items on your regular agenda are inputs as opposed to outputs or outcomes. And so then the board submits its questions, the superintendent then ideally responds to those questions in writing as a part of those items. What that process is intended to accomplish is that a lot of the concerns that are lifted up, and a lot of the clarity that's required is accomplished prior to the trustees ever showing up at the meeting, with the intention then that it's just a better use of your time to get simple inquiries out of the way, so that if there's something more complicated, you've got time for that, but hopefully it just frees up time entirely to be focused on monitoring your student outcomes. Is that responsive to what you're saying you'd like to do?
Absolutely, and I needed to hear that part about what you just mentioned, to not backfill it with something else. That would simply mean that would give me more time to focus on student outcomes.
Yeah, and that's a critical part, because a couple boards have started to go that direction. It's like, okay, we freed up all this time. Now let's talk more about the color of the cheerleader socks.
No, wait, I need to intervene here, okay? When the superintendent came, our superintendent came, I spent about a year being mad at him.
I've been mad at him too.
Yeah, and I'm not going to be done until I'm done. Because what Cinto said is fundamental, and I don't think you're hearing it. And we don't know how to do this, and we need to know. Okay? So, I thought it was really a great idea to have a week. I came home and told my husband and my daughter and a lot of other people what a great idea this was. We're going to require it, okay? It has not happened once. Did you see this bond? This is more than a year's budget, okay? $950 million. We got this after we got here at the meeting tonight, and at least two of us, and more, I think, screamed and yelled and were rude, asking for this in advance, and we didn't get it. And so I started out by saying I spent a year mad at the superintendent, okay? I'm morphing into a different view. I don't think anybody can make these people do their job the way we want it done. And I am not kidding you, and I will bet you that if you talk to 10 boards or 10 superintendents who know what they're talking about, you are going to find out that this is the way it is in big city school districts.
Yeah, so I can actually tell you exactly how to make this work, but it's actually more on you than it is on the superintendent.
I know what the rule is. You said just don't put it on the agenda. I've said that 10 times, and it's always get on. I'm not president. I did recover from my heart trouble this spring, which is very nice, but I don't think I should be president.
So to be clear, this is a board choice. This what the both of you are describing lives in the adult behaviors on the board. If the board says this is what we expect, and then the board doesn't back that up with action, then the only things that are possible is either the board was not actually moving as a unit and saying this is what we expect, or the board is simply unwilling to honor its word.
No, I still think you're not getting it, because I don't think you understand. I spent a lot of time studying power in my life, a lot, okay?
Studying what?
Power.
The distribution of power. And let me show you how this happens. We passed, I think it was $1.5 million, might have been $2.5 million tonight. I voted against it, to continue a program that we started a year ago. We have no end of the year performance on it, okay? So what happened is it gets put on the agenda, and you have a choice of either to vote against it or to vote for it, okay? So everybody votes for it, even though we haven't had the stuff.
Yeah, so
This bond, okay,
what that doesn't,
I'm gonna finish this. The bond is a
hold
better
on, madam,
example.
hold on. So what that doesn't change is that ultimately the board has to make a decision. And if the board doesn't actually want this information in advance, then the board won't get it. And so I hear you saying you want it in advance, and I even hear you saying that the board has said it wanted it in advance.
The board does want it in advance.
But
We don't know how to get it.
what the board wants lives in what the board does. And so I can tell you how this is played out on other boards, and yeah, it works the exact same way. Either you say this is what the board expects, and then the board lives by that, or there's a much clearer message about what the board actually expects. But that is the path forward, and so that's something the 9 of you have to grapple with. But if it's something you expect, then you have to make that statement clear, and then you have to actually live by it. And you need to be clear. There will be, it's a painful process. There are hiccups. So can I support you all through that process? Yes, I can absolutely say here are steps the board can take. And can I support your administration through that process? Yes, I can say here are specific steps you can take. But at the end of the day, the power in this institution lies with the board and the choices that the 9 of you make. And your superintendent is not bound by the will of 1 or 2 members, even if they're members that I personally agree with. What the superintendent is bound by is the will of the board as a whole. And so this is doable, and I think there's value in doing it for all the reasons that you want it done. But ultimately, that's a decision that the 9 of you have to make. All of that said, none of that, no matter how frustrating it is for you, no matter how frustrating it is for anyone, none of that absolves the board of saying that what it wants is to improve student outcomes, but only spending 1% of your time on it. And so are there specific strategies that will make it easier for you to spend more of your time really monitoring student progress? Yeah. And this is one of those strategies. I believe that this would be helpful to you all. But even if this strategy does not move forward, that doesn't absolve the board from having to make the decision, either we're going to spend more time focusing on our student outcomes or we're not. Because what's stopping you isn't this one technical thing. Would it be easier without this thing in the way? I personally believe it would be easier. But that's not what's stopping you. The 9 of you have the power to redesign your agendas today such that you're focused on the things that you most want to be focused on. Inside of that, there are some technical things that would help. But I just want to be clear. Those technical phenomenon is not what is stopping you from being focused on student outcomes. Those are choices that the 9 of you make. And if what you want is some technical assistance and kind of working through the nuts and bolts of this, I'm free, so the price is right. I'm happy to work as much time as it takes to support the board in trying to implement this if it's the will of the board, and certainly supporting the administration because it is a very hefty lift. As you recall, when we first had this conversation, I said expect about 3 months before this really gets there because it is a very tough lift operationally for administration of a district this size to get there. And so once the board gets serious about it, it's still a 3-month haul before you can expect it with some amount of perfection. But I just want to be clear, that is not what is preventing you from doing these 3 things, that the board can choose at any time to focus its time in this manner. What else? I saw you nodding your head over there. Is there something on your mind back there?
I was agreeing with you.
That's a bad move. Well, what particularly were you agreeing with? Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. So the thing that I wanted to share with you is what I shared with you, which is this conversation about inputs, outputs, outcomes, other outcomes, and student outcomes. So that was the sole point of me coming on up here and spending time with you is because I wanted to walk through that and just give you an opportunity to self-evaluate. And so you self-evaluated and you say, here's what we say we want, here's what we're actually spending our time on, and so now you can do with that as you will. So in whatever time remaining, I certainly want to open the floor for inquiries. If there are other matters that I can be responsive to, I certainly want to avail myself.
If we could back up just for a second.
Yeah.
3 months, what do you see as the obstacles what part of staff slows the most? Which part of
Yeah.
staff would we stress the most? Like
Yeah.
machine stress, not psychological.
Yeah, so one of the things I said earlier is that every organization is perfectly organized to get the results it's getting. Right now, your budgetary systems are perfectly organized to get the results they're getting. And it is a hard lift to move people from expecting we say we want to spend it now and then we move forward and then the boards. It's a hard lift for people to have to think this out weeks in advance. I personally think it is a very good practice, for folks to have to be more thoughtful. And I'll tell you, my actual recommendation, is have it 14 days in advance. But in the good book, we only wrote it down 7 days in advance. But 14 days is actually doable. But what it meant in reality is that after 3 months were up, we simply had to say anything that's not on there is not on there. And then the superintendent would say, well, but we really need the board to address this right now, otherwise children will be hurt. And my response as board president was, so let me clarify. What you're saying is your organizational skills are hurting my children. And the superintendent said, you know what, we're gonna go figure this out and we'll bring it to you next month. Until you get to the point where, as a board, that's kind of the line that you draw, it's going to be very hard because realigning your budgetary processes is just really complicated. And so if there is not, just drop dead expectation from the board to do that, then most likely you shouldn't expect that it's going to occur. And that's just the way these things work. It is a really hard system to modify because you've got a lot of technology embedded in it. You've got a lot of current operating procedures embedded. That's why I said expect it to take a solid 3 months from the day you started, which maybe will be tomorrow, to the day when the administration can really consistently operationalize in that manner. But the biggest issue is that there are just a lot of budgetary procedures. I don't have eyes in the back of my head, but if I did, I could see some of your administrators who are thinking to themselves right now, that would be a very different way of operating because it's just not a constraint they've lived under. But that's where that issue lives. It's in your your CFO's shop,
Okay,
and getting
thank
those
you.
processes organized.
Thank you.
Yeah. What other questions do you have? What other things would you like to discuss before I get out of your way? Yes, ma'am.
You almost insist, or more points are given to a board that only evaluates the superintendent. It's like being ding dong, the superintendent on student outcomes.
Yeah.
And not the other stuff.
Yeah, there's a real value not only in heavily focusing your attention on how you evaluate your superintendent in terms of how your student's doing, but there's also a real value in self-evaluating as a board before you try to evaluate the superintendent. So imagine you all were saying, superintendent, we really want student outcomes to increase this much. No, we're only gonna attend to it this much, but this is what we want. There's some inherent lack of integrity in that. If we say we think it's this important for the superintendent, then we ought to make it at least this important for us. But right now, it's just, it's incongruent. That's all. But yeah, it's a beautiful thing to notice. It's a beautiful thing to notice. Yes, ma'am.
So,
Oh.
excuse me. The self-evaluation, so we're going to use the one that's in our book.
Yes, ma'am.
And we can just do that ourselves?
Yeah, so.
And what about the ending of the evaluation?
Yeah, so the recommendation for how to do that, it's a great question, is inside the Lone Star Governance Manual, there is the Lone Star Governance instrument, and you can use that, and it's got the multiple pages, and you can see how many points you have in each column. And so the way we recommend you go about this is every 3 months, you do a self-evaluation. And the first time you do it, it usually takes a little bit longer, but after that, it's pretty quick because everybody already knows what the program is. But here's the way we recommend you do it. That, a week or so before the board meeting where you're going to conduct your board self-evaluation for that quarter, is you send that schedule home with each, trustee and say, fill this out, and then come to the board meeting. And then at the board meeting, you actually say, okay, so for our goal progress measures, that's the first page of the instrument. It's the most, there's a reason it's the first page because it's literally the most important thing, having your student outcome goals. So that's the first page of the instrument. And so you'd look at that and figure out, each of you individually, all 10 of you individually would identify how many points do we think we have on this particular page. And then you talk about it, and some of you would say, oh, we've got 0, and some of you like, oh, we've got 15, and then you'd quickly realize, oh, we've got 4. And then once you've reached consensus about that, then the 10 of you would go to the next page, the next page, the next page, and you add them all up, and you'd see how many points out of 100 you have. And so it's a 100-point scale that really evaluates to what extent are your adult behaviors, the 10 of you, aligned with the type of behaviors that research suggests are correlated with improvements in student outcomes on a scale of 0 to 100. And so that's how we recommend you do it. First, that you do it individually, the 10 of you, and then you come together at a meeting, and then you work through it on a consensus basis, or if you can't get there, then you'd actually just have to vote, majority rules, and identify what's our score for each page of this instrument, and then you'd add them all up, and you determine how many points out of 100 do we have. And then in 3 months down the road, you do it again. And then 3 months down the road, you do it again. What's the value of conducting a self-evaluation on a quarterly basis? Yeah.
Having conversation, being intentional about
Yeah, it forces you to have the conversation and be intentional about monitoring your own work to figure out, are we actually monitoring progress for our students? If you sat down every 3 months and had the conversation, okay, 3 months ago, we said we only focused 1%, and we said we wanted to increase that. Now it's 3 months later. Have we actually increased that, or is it still the same 1%? That's a worthwhile conversation to have. I had the opportunity to be the lead author on a national study of boards that really looked at a number of governance behaviors, but one of them was the correlation between board self-evaluation and relative improvements in student outcomes, and what the correlation, and a correlation existed that boards that self-evaluated, their students tended to grow faster than the students who are served by boards who didn't self-evaluate. Now, this is correlation. This is not causality. It's a whole different standard of science. But a correlation does exist. And so there is benefit to your students of you being reflective in your work, in the same way that there's benefit to your students from your teachers being reflective in their work, and the principals being reflective in their work, and the superintendent being reflective in their work. Yes, sir.
And I think in addition to the benefit of reflection, I think there's some kind of unexpected positive consequences of that as well. And to use the example, what gets measured gets done.
Yeah.
So we were asked to do presentations. I should probably be more intentional about telling the story, because had we celebrated the item that was voted on tonight, the Achieve 3000, the data, which is very encouraging in terms of students who are participating in it, and the heightened Alexile levels, then it would have been a much easier vote, because it would have been a unanimous instead of an 8-1, because we would have had a presentation on the increases in reading in our district. And in fact, the lead story today is not that the board was provided with finally, I give you that, the binders with regard to the bond, which will not be voted on tonight. We voted on it in a week or later. But the lead story today is that the number of IR schools has decreased about 36%.
Yeah.
And I think that also is correlated to our focus on reading, on middle years math, and college and career.
Yeah.
And so I think if once we begin to spend the time on the percentage of time on student outcomes, then I think other positive things will happen.
Yeah.
To the earlier point, and Mr. Ramos is absolutely correct. That's a structural thing. We have to move our leadership team meeting from Tuesday to Monday,
Right.
move board agenda review from Wednesday to the previous Friday, those kinds of things. They can happen. And then the larger conversation, because this is a production, to put this together and do this whole thing. I mean, the other long term, we're not ready for it yet, but the other long term is perhaps to what we talked about in Kansas City. We have one board meeting, where you do business and do the, and then the other one is more of a study session, more of a workshop. Maybe some consent items that are kind of the hygienic things you have to do.
Yeah.
But that's something that we ought to talk about moving forward as well.
Yeah. Any other thoughts or questions? Yes, ma'am.
So our next step in our work with Lone programs is to develop constraints for ourselves.
Yeah.
I don't think any of us know how to do that. I mean, I don't know how to do that.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
We struggled with it.
And I am, knowing this board, I think
Gladly.
that that's a challenge that we're going to have. And I would like to know if you have any advice, if you can provide any advice, without us having to call you every, 3 months to say, AJ, come help us, come
So,
save us.
two things. One, we can knock out the rough draft of that in approximately about an hour and a half to 2 hours, and we can crank through and iterate on a first draft of all that stuff and get you up and moving. After you've cranked through that, I'd be happy to show you a bunch of examples of stuff, that other, districts around the state either already are adopting or already have adopted, and then you can compare what you've come up with what other people have come up with and decide if you want to keep yours or not. Like all of that we can get done inside of a couple hours, and so it's actually not a complicated process. To the other point, call me. You'll never call me too early, too late, or too often. Like I am in this for you to win this, and whatever that takes from me, expect that that's what I'm willing to give. I literally have other boards that have said, "Hey AJ, we need you to help us. Can we go knock on some doors in the neighborhood?" I've been knocking on doors. I'm gonna go knock on some more. AJ, will you show up at this church basement? We have community who wants to talk about this. I show up. Will you show up at the neighborhood association? Will you show up at board meetings? I defy you to make demands of my support that I won't be willing to offer. As long as you are willing to do the work, because I'm not going to out-hustle you for your children, but as long as you're willing to do the work, challenge me to be the support mechanism that you deserve and that your children deserve. And my commitment is I'm going to find a way to step up. And so if that's an area of struggle, then let me know when you're ready to sit down for a couple hours, and we'll crank through. And we'll get a rough draft out there, and then usually that kind of gets the ball rolling, and if people can iterate from there on their own.
So can I suggest to the board, because I know we're not going to want to have a workshop every time we have to, it's hard for us to come together for all of these workshops, that we put together an ad hoc to work on developing those before coming to the full board.
The constraints, you mean?
Yeah.
You mean just to bring some ideas back to the
Yeah.
board, to get the ball rolling? Yeah, a number of boards have done that, taken that approach.
Does that work in your
I
agreement?
mean, would that be?
As long as people understand that committee work is not a substitute for board work. Like the intention of a committee is to take the first few chews, not to chew the whole thing and swallow it. And so as long as the board understands that committee work it's never acceptable for committee work to be a substitute for board work, then yes, that absolutely works. When the board simply abdicates its responsibilities to a committee, that does not work. That is not honoring the one voice principle. That is not unity. Yeah, other questions? But yeah, sign me up. I'm all in. Other questions? Anything else that I can be responsive to? My number? I don't know. Let me find out. It is 512.
He's always the first one in your contact.
Yeah. In case of emergency, AJ Crable. Let's see. My mobile is 512-230-8362. And hit me up on text, call, whatever meets your need. Is there anything else? Madam President, Superintendent, thank you for the invitation, and I look forward to coming back. Now, the training is set aside. I do have one other hat that I need to wear. So that was the AJ, the Happy Trainer hat. Now I need to put on AJ, the bureaucrat hat for a moment. In the 84th legislative session in 2015, there was a law passed, 1842, House Bill 1842. It significantly reimagined some of the agency's authorities relative to school campuses that have been underperforming for an extended period of time. It used to be that the agency had a tremendous degree of discretion. House Bill 1842 removed that discretion. Effective at the end of the 17-18 school year, any campuses that are in IR5 status, effective at the end of the 17-18 school year. So next week will be August 15th of 2017, and you will receive preliminary ratings. If you have any campuses that are in IR4 status or higher, when the preliminary ratings come out next week, this applies to them. That at the end of the 17-18 school year, if on August 15th of 2018, any of those IR4 campuses move forward and become IR5 campuses, in the event that occurs, at the end of the 17-18 school year, any campus that is IR5 or greater the Commissioner of Education shall, this is what it says in the statute, either close the campus or install a board of managers. A board of managers for the district.
And that's why I was saying the whole board needs to know that they're responsible for every school.
That's correct.
In Fort Worth ISD, whether it's District 3 or 4 or 9, you're responsible for every school. And if one school is, in that rating, then they can replace the entire board.
And so
remove
you need to be aware that you currently have an IR6, IR5, and IR4 campus. Those are Logan, White, and Terrell, respectively.
Can you read them to us?
Hopefully, this is not news.
Logan, no, it's not.
Logan, White, and Terrell,
White has been that way.
all
since
three
they were
elementaries.
built. That's a
They
shame.
are in IR 6, 5, and 4, respectively, is what we're projecting. Should any of those campuses show up on the IR list next year, August 15th of 2018, at that moment, you will receive communication from the agency either ordering the closure of the campus or an installation of a board of managers for the district. The law is very explicit on this matter. So what will happen is the preliminary ratings will come out next week. Shortly thereafter, you will receive a letter from me simply describing this phenomenon. Here are the campuses that are in these multi-year IR status that could be affected. And this is not a Fort Worth specific thing. We're sending a heads-up letter to any districts that might be affected by this particular statute. Again, this is new statute, new legislation that was passed. And so there are some people for whom this is a surprise. And so that's why we're sending a heads-up letter to anyone who might be affected by it across the state. We're projecting somewhere in the neighborhood of 65 campuses across the state, and you have 3. And so all there is to know is that the board has to be deeply, deeply focused on what is happening with the well-being and the achievement of the students of those campuses. It's obviously your responsibility at all times. But as a colleague, my intention is simply alert you that there are very significant consequences for extended failure in IR campuses that the legislature has enacted and that the agency is obligated to execute should we come there. My aspiration is particularly based on the tremendous improvement that you all experienced this year, is that we won't be having this conversation next year, is that those campuses will continue to rise and that none of them will be in IR status, and so then this conversation is irrelevant. But as a colleague, what's really important to me is that you never be surprised. That's why I'm giving you a heads up a year out, so that this isn't a last minute thing that you all are unalerted to.
Sure, and thank you, AJ, and we are well aware of that. Of the 3, one of the campuses has been closed, and those students are going to take another school. And 2 are our leadership academies, where we have gone through the process of identifying high-performing teachers, move them to those schools, principals as well, and we'll be providing them with a great deal of support throughout the school year. So we're laser-like focused on Logan and on White that are continuing as leadership academies.
Right. And Terrell's already closed.
Right.
We don't yet have that reflected in Ask Ted.
Okay.
And so, make sure that happens.
Right.
We'll take it off the list. Yes, ma'am.
I just want to say that Dr. Scribner, since he's been here, he is about equity. And he has been working to place resources in the schools where the most need. Now, you say have some individuals that don't understand that.
Mm-hmm.
And I keep saying that we can't fight what he's doing. Board members, we all have to want the resources where the most needs are in the schools.
Yeah.
And it's not about District 4 or you're over District 5 or District 9. We have to be concerned about all of the schools, and we were told that when we visited TEA. And so we need to reiterate what Dr. Scribner is doing is the right thing. So when we fight against what he's doing, then we are really relieving ourselves from a board position.
I'll certainly say that as I travel around the state, I have a responsibility for being of service to our school improvement work at the agency. That's part of my job. And so inside of that, I travel around the state and visit campuses that are not yet where they want to be, like some of your campuses are. And one of the most frequent strategies I see that's been really successful is when districts have been intentional about step one. It's a two-step process. Step one, how do we identify our most effective principals and teachers? And then step two, how do we inspire them to be the places where student need is the greatest? Both of those are very difficult undertakings. Being able to effectively identify highly effective principals and teachers is a large organizational challenge that many organizations have not taken on. In this regard, I'm most inspired by the research out of the Gates Foundation that really looks at measures of effective teaching. It says you have to have multiple measures. We're looking at two-step value-added measures for student, principal, teacher, and principal performance. We're looking at well-formed student surveys as well as principal evaluations, but having some type of process that statistically reveals a normal curve distribution of performance and identifies the people at the far right end of that curve. How are we ensuring that those people are making it into our campuses where the student need is the greatest? And then the other part of that is you actually have to inspire that to occur. Trying to force those people to go into those campuses isn't the way. You have to leadership your way through this phenomenon. You have to come up with a way of how are we leading such that people are inspired to go to those campuses and serve, and that they are living inside of their calling and their mission. Those are not two easy things to do, but collectively, they represent a strategy that has had a great deal of success in a lot of our IR campuses across the state when districts have taken on the huge challenge that those two things represent. Yeah, so I appreciate that, and I definitely co-sign that. Coming up with systematic approach to understanding who are our most effective principals and teachers, and then coming up with a way of inspiring them to be in the place where student needs are the greatest. It's a critical strategy. Anything else? Well, I have exhausted my trainer hat and my bureaucrat hat. As always, thank you for your hospitality and your time. I look forward to coming back to be of service.
Any questions or concerns? We'll do that. You want to discuss now?
I don't know, what's the best way to
Can we
send it?
discuss now, Ms. Soto?
Just set the meeting or send an email?
We'll send an email and set it.
Okay, we'll do an email.
Okay.
Right.
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 Okay, good.
Yes, and thank you for catching that. And on that note, we are adjourned.